Attention all FD fans. If you are heading to an event this year, I've got an easy way for you to save yourself $5. So when you go to pick up tickets for any of the 8 events, that's any of them, Long Beach, Seattle, Atlanta, whatever it is that you want to go to, at checkout, use the code FD podcast. It'll save you $5 doing this for the 20th season. So head over, use the coupon code, save yourself some money, and I'll see you out there. Maybe you'll see me walking around. I don't know. If you do, say hi. Tell me, hey, I saved $5. If you want to give me that $5, I'm okay with that too. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the official podcast of Formula Drift. It's the Outerzone. I'm Jacob, and we have Mr. DeNofa himself on. Dude, I'm stoked. I'm like top 5 people I wanted to talk to. I'm not
really? Wow. Top 5. That's pretty solid. I feel good about that. That's a good way to start this. Get the attitude up high,
I don't know if you know this, but you're kind of a controversial figure. Like you kind of are like, it's not that you're controversial. You just have very little filter. So like everybody's kind of waiting for you to say something. So
I mean, I just say it like it is. It is what it is.
I agree. And I think that's why people enjoy it so much is because like you're in this position now with RTR where you're not supposed to be, but you're in like this big team that's like, well-funded and rigs and all this shit. But like, to hang out with you, it's just like any of the grassroots guys. Like there's no difference there. And you didn't stop trolling, I think is probably like the biggest thing.
I feel like that's what drifting is. It's fun, it's enjoyable. Like I drifting at the highest level in Formula Drift is not a lot different than just driving for fun and enjoying it. Like there's definitely the competitive end of it, but for me it's always just been that like I'm here to do the best that I can. It doesn't matter whether I'm at FD or I'm driving by myself in the morning before school or like whatever the scenario is. It's like just drive to the best abilities that you can and be what you are.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm glad you like went right to the school stuff because like I think a lot of people don't realize how long you've been driving. Like what, 14? Like Dad's Alfa Romeo, basically.
Yeah. That was like the first
whether
car
you're
I
supposed to
ever
or not
drifted was an Alfa Romeo. My dad gave me this '84 Alfa Romeo Spider, and like I don't really think I drove that ever with a driver's license kind of scenario. Just like around the block, do a burnout, whatever, and got into cars like by tinkering and messing and ruining that car, which is not the car to ruin, but. Yes, I started when I was 15, I think my first drift event was, which is, I guess, now almost 20 years ago.
You got to love it when, like, your mom has to drive you to the drift event,
That's how it was. Right? It was. And now I'm like the old dude at the skate park.
Yeah, what's that been like? Because, like, obviously same thing, like, I guess a lot of people don't realize that, like, your BMX career is pretty, like, well-established. Like, back in the day, obviously. It's a little different now. Ago. So... Were you more racing or freestyle when you started?
I was more racing. I rode a lot of just kind of like whatever, dirt and street and park and all that. But I was mostly focused on the racing, and it was more just like, I'm gonna go ride for fun. I loved riding my bike, so just kind of do whatever.
So is there like any plans on bringing back like the Roadkill BMX team just for shits and giggles?
They have a team again now. I'm not a part of it. We have some guys that are running it, and I've seen some things here and there post up, and it's still around doing things, which is cool. My dad's not involved in it really anymore, but it was cool. Yeah, growing up, riding for Roadkill and having a basically factory back team with some pretty good partners and traveling all over and racing. It's like really not a lot different than what it is now, except we have to load an entire rig full of stuff instead of just jamming it in a bike box that looks like a golf bag and flying wherever we need to go.
Yeah. Are you active in loading the trailer? Or are you like what are you just kind of like, okay, you guys got this? Like, let me know if you need anything, but like, I'll be here.
That's how it is, like, for sure. It's cool because like I live like both lives. Like I still drive every weekend, whether it's with FD or not. And I don't really have a full-time mechanic or anybody helping me. It's basically my wife and I for any other event you see me drive. So Fox Body, the TI, any of those cars that I go out and do stuff with. That's all just, me start to finish. And then with the RTR stuff, I get to be like, hey, I'm here to drive and focus on driving, and that's the goal. And like in the beginning, I was always like, I got to get in here and mess with this and work on this and all that. Because like I didn't know any different. And like we've talked about this all the time. Like I just do it. Like when I'm like, hey, I want this, I want that. I'm like, and they're like, okay, how do we do that? How do we do this? What do we want to do? I'm like, Dad, I'll just do it. And now I'm like, let me explain how to do this. So that way, moving forward, I don't have to do it again. And like the team is super smart, really intelligent. Like they're on it. They fix everything. So now I don't touch anything like this on the car besides in the off season, like setting things up.
That's a huge trust thing though. Like just to be able to say to those guys, like I'm not a good wrench, but like I still, if I know I've tightened something, then like I know I've tightened it and it's done. But in a lot of those cases, like you have to take their word for it. And I'm not saying like the RTR mechanics don't know what the hell they're doing, but like there's still a massive trust factor of like, did you nut and bolt this? And they're like, yeah. You're like, okay, because like I didn't see you nut and bolt this, but I'm going to assume you did.
I don't think I ever was worried about it because I figured like almost anybody who's wrenching on the car is better than me at wrenching on a car. I'm not a good mechanic. Like if you ask anybody, I'm like the guy who's like, really? I'm a problem solver, not a nice mechanic. Okay. So like I'm the guy who's really good at telling you how to do it now, but I'm awful at execution. So for me, it's more of like the perfect scenario with the RTR camp. And then it's actually made it so that now when I work on stuff, it's because I want to and not necessarily I have to and need to. Where before I joined the RTR team, it was like, I have to do this. This is my job. If I don't do this, I'm screwed. So I was like 70 hours a week, like building the chassis, building the motors, doing everything, like start to finish, and with some help, obviously, back then. But it was a lot. Yeah. I'm definitely enjoying drifting much more with the RTR team than I was previously.
Well, it's like one of those, like, I don't know about you, but like when I expressed an interest in cars, everyone's like, oh, you should be a mechanic. And like every mechanic I ever spoke to is like, look, if you enjoy cars, don't become a mechanic. Because like it's just going to ruin the entire thing for you.
Yeah, I think there's definitely value in that. I think there's definitely value in having mechanical knowledge and being able to do it yourself. But like in the long run and your sanity, it's probably not ideal. Because I'm like, I should just hire someone to do all of this. And I'm like, I could get my time back and whatnot. But then I'm like, I'd only do like a couple of these projects because I'd never be able to afford to do it if I didn't do it myself. The hours just they rack up really quickly. So, it's a balance.
Well, I mean, we were talking about that right before we recorded. You literally pulled an engine out before this. Like, I mean, I can almost smell the degreaser on your hands from here.
For real. Like 5 minutes before we shot this, and you were messaging me, hey, are we doing this? I'm like, I'm late. I just got this motor out, but I blew the motor up in my Miata, which was my grandma's car originally, and like it's been a family heirloom type scenario. So I'm like, I can't not have this car going. So I blew it up 2 days ago, and the motor's out now. We're gonna build a new motor and put it back in, but the first step was getting everything out of it.
Was that the one that like you got back? If I remember correctly, like, did you always have it or did you get it back? Because I know you recently got a Miata. I wasn't sure if that's a different one.
So I've had this for a while, probably like 7 years now. My grandma bought it new. And she was like, oh, I want to trade it in. I'm like, do not trade in. I'll take it. Like, let me get this. And I've proceeded to ruin it. You're going to get screwed on that trade-in. I proceeded to ruin it since I got it.
They're fun. They're great cars. Great. I mean, I still think that like if you're going to get into drifting, you need to at least get in one just to understand like how to maintain momentum, how to deal with a car with that short of a wheelbase, like how to deal with a low-powered car, how to drive on 15-inch wheels. Like there's so much you can glean from that one experience, even if it's for a day, even if it's for like 2 laps. It's like it almost provides more respect for people that drive those chassis well because they're just not easy to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like I started in one of those. That was like my first real drift car. And as soon as I drove anything else, I was like, man, it's really hard to drift a Miata. And this was before Angle, before like people knew what we were doing, we were just like, oh, we just get around, like figuring this out. It was like 03, 04, and I just remember driving like a E36 for the first time after driving Miatas for a long time. And all it had was like tie rod spacers and shocks. And I was like, this is better than my drift car that I built to compete in. And it's just like a beater.
Yeah.
So I was like, I probably need to move on from that.
Yeah, just the bite, forward bite, side bite, everything. Just like, even like you said, with tie rod spacers, just even having, because like stock Miata angle is so bad.
And the wheelbase is like 18 inches shorter than an E36, so it's crazy.
Yeah, it's just a constant fight that whole time. Would you say that driving those more or less shittier chassis or driving with, I know the BMW purists are going to get mad at me here, but like driving with those engines that were unreliable, does that set you up for success later on? Because it's like training with a weight vest on?
I I don't think it does, because I think the reliability aspect of it is the most important part, like getting laps and driving and doing the best you can. So I think...
Which, like, for a couple of years was probably pretty tough for you.
Yeah, it was. I had a couple of years where it was like a disaster. I was like, I quit.
Yeah.
This is so much. Like, I'm like, if I do 7 more 70-hour weeks, I'm deciding to be done. Like, let me make this decision here, you know? But, yeah, I mean, the reliability aspect, I don't think so. But those cars are, like, for the money and for what they are, like, they're really good cars, you know? They're getting phased out because they don't have a lot of power out of the box. And there's all these new chassis that, you know, in the last 10 years have become affordable. And they're kind of getting to the point where they're just, I don't mean like getting phased out because they're not competitive, but getting phased out just because you buy it and you're like, I immediately have to do some sort of turbo kit on a car that isn't turbo, or I have to do an engine swap, or now the transmission's weak, or now the diff or the axles. And it just turns into this whole thing where you're like,
subframe mounts.
Yeah, I could have just bought a S550 Mustang for 10 grand and it would have already had a great motor and trans and axles and diff and everything's indestructible. And then you just go drive it and have fun, you know?
Yeah, I think there's something to be said. I mean, I know you're a huge proponent of not overbuilding a car, but there's something to be said about just seat time, just reliable, consistent. Just go out and put in the reps.
Yeah,
right?
For sure, absolutely. I mean that's the most important thing. I tell everybody, they're like, okay, I have a drift car. It's not that good. I'm like, is it reliable? And they're like, yeah, I can go like, you know, whole event, not really have any problems. You know, keep some spares.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm like, just go drive. I'm like, buy too many tires right off the bat and just go drive.
Yeah.
And enjoy it and do everything you can. Every lap that you drive, you're going to learn something. And I use an example like when I was driving at Park all the time with the school, like I've probably done 1,500 laps at Park and I still find cool little tricks. I still improve something. I still get faster. I still can have more angle. There's like little things I keep doing. And like, I feel like I'm probably one of the only people outside of like maybe James with like Mondello or whatever, where I've driven so many laps on a track and I'm still learning and still enjoying it, you know?
So do you think you could do Park blindfolded? Like legitimately, if somebody blindfolded you,
If it was life or
like
death.
let's say a day of practice. Okay.
It's going to be bad. There's a lot of things to crash into. Like if I had a safety person,
It's a good point.
that could like handbrake it and spin it out, like when things weren't going right. Maybe. I've done an entire lap there without touching the steering wheel after entry. So basically you enter and then you drive everything off of the brake, gas, clutch, and handbrake. No touching of the steering wheel. And I could do a whole lap.
Wow.
It took me probably 2 hours to get one without touching the steering wheel because there's one spot that you always want to touch the steering wheel because you're going to crash, but like you just got to plow through it and make it work. But blindfolded would be hard because it's such a small technical track.
Yeah, it's not like there's huge runoffs where like, you know, if you're off by like 3 feet, you're okay. Like if you're off by 1.5 feet, like you're in the grass at that point, or into a tree,
or in the river, or whatever, you know. But maybe if I planned it and practiced it by like closing my eyes for a few sections of the track, so I wasn't so focused on the points of the track. But that's like the most important thing in drifting is looking ahead and planning where you're going to put the front or the back of the car. Like I tell people, like teaching them all the time, like if you're going towards something, when you want to put the back of the car there, you stare there until you achieve that. And as soon as you achieve that, then you look to the next spot, you know? So,
well, it's like teaching a kid to ride a bike. Like, I mean, or teaching my kids how to like skate. It's like, okay, well, if you look down, that's where you're going to go. So if you're looking straight ahead, you're going to be more likely to keep going straight or staying up on your feet. So I do think that's a huge issue. As somebody who's like looked at hundreds, if not thousands of hours of like in-car footage ranging from, you know, pro level all the way down, I would say that's one of the biggest factors is indecisiveness in your controls. You see like the shaky hands and like going to grab ship and not actually doing anything, and then looking in the wrong place or looking really short-sighted or like constantly changing your gaze. That seems to be the one thing if I had to pick for like young drivers who are kind of at that, I guess that stall point, right? Because everybody kind of hits that wall where you're like, I don't know why I'm not getting better. Like I'm still driving, but I can't link or I can't tandem.
Yeah, most of the time I have the problem too.
Yeah, it seems to be that.
And I just am like, oh, I'm not looking where I want to go.
Do you?
Like when I go to the track and I'm having a bad day, like I'm like, I can't figure this out. Like this part of the track is really hard. Like, I'm chasing like where I need to be on track, and the guys are like, oh, we changed the car, like set you up better so it's easier for you. And I'm like, no, it's not the car. Like, it's me. I just need to look at a different place, pick up a different point, And amazingly, typically when I do that and start thinking a little bit more ahead and planning things out, it works great.
Is that something you're doing, like in practice? You're like, obviously most tracks you probably have points that you're familiar with, but you get to something like Utah where you kind of like look at it, do the track walk or bike or whatever and be like, okay, where am I? I'm coming through this first corner. What am I looking at? Is it like, the big Type S sign that Mike Power is about to crash through? Like, is that where I'm going to go? Or, like what is that how you plan that out? Or
I don't really,
are you constantly updating
I don't really
it?
do it per se. Like while I'm walking the track, usually it's just the first time driving. I pick some points out, like generic areas of where I'm going to look. And then normally they're like either too far or too short on things. And I just adjust those little things to make sure I'm looking where I want. And then in the chase, like you got to find places where you can look when you're smoked out or like where you like key points.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're, a flag pole that's like way off track, but like it's a marker that you're like, if I go towards that, I'm good. If I'm way left or way right, I'm in big trouble. So just generic types of deals when you're screwed in the smoke, that's a big deal. But yeah, just, you always got to look ahead. Like that's one of the biggest things. You got to look ahead and plan it, look farther ahead than you think. And it's not like I deal with a lot of road race guys and they're always like, yeah, I always look ahead, eyes up. And I'm like, yeah, but you keep looking at the next 50 feet. And drifting, you like want to pick a point and stare at it till you know you're going to make it to it and then pick another point.
Right.
So it's a little more point and shoot than other forms.
Do you think road race guys, because they utilize a different, methodology and a different way of looking forward and like attacking something, do you think that may hinder them when they come into drifting because they're always trying to look further out than what's actually possible?
It could be, yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of different scenarios with that. I think they feel grip different. They feel the limitations different. And I feel like it's always easier to go the other way. Like when you drift, when you go road racing, typically you're like, oh, I overdrove it, back down, cool, we're good. We're within the realm of enough speed. But I feel like the more you road race, the longer you road race, the harder it is to be able to drift and pinpoint those things and have like an aggressive, like over the top style. If you look previously, most road race dudes are very like meticulous, locked into angle, but not a ton, and like putting the car where it needs to go, and like a little less flair aspect of it, but like really consistent and good drivers. That's typically what I see. But teaching, the longer you've road raced, the harder the first hour of me teaching is always. It's always like, you got to overdrive it, like way overdrive it, and then we'll turn it back. Like drive like a total asshole, and then we'll bring it back.
It's funny you say that because like when I went for my motorcycle license, like I grew up riding dirt bikes and, we have to do like a course and it drops your insurance and shit. And they asked like, how long have you been riding motorcycles? And everybody who said, oh, first time, they're like, yay. And then they get to me, I'm like, oh, since I was like 3. And they're like, oh. I'm like, what? They're like, we're going to have to break you of so many bad habits. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, what did you drive? And I told them the bike, like an old 2-stroke. And they're like, guaranteed, you're going to sit there and you're just going to play with the throttle the entire time you're waiting. I'm like, no, I won't.
Yeah.
Sure as shit. They're giving instruction. The car's like the bike's supposed to be idling and I'm just making sure it doesn't die out.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's fine. It'll idle. Like, you're okay.
That's a thing for sure.
Yeah. It's just breaking that ingrained habit, right? So you mentioned style stuff. So I want to know, like, are you actively trying to add more style to your driving, or is it just a completely natural thing at this point?
I'm usually doing the opposite. I'm usually like,
you're trying to wrangle it back in?
Yeah. I want to drive at the maximum that can be all the time, no matter what, and right. I feel like drifting, to me, the most important part of drifting over top of anything is the style. Because like if it was a race or if it was a whatever, it would not be drifting then. So for me, the style aspect of it is the most important. But because I've always driven that way and always focused on it, like my level of, let's say, angle that I drive with, like my median, my average, like where I'm comfortable driving is just pretty deep, and I use the angle to slow the car like as much as possible. So instead of just braking and utilizing a lot of foot brake or whatever, I might do that, but for a shorter period of time and try to have as much angle and whatnot as possible. And I feel most comfortable like when I have like a large amount of wheel speed and basically, putting the car where I need to, driving it off the rear tires. And I feel like the only reason I'm kind of fast when I do that is just because I'm on the gas more than most other people. Like, right. I think my style of driving is not necessarily fast whatsoever, but it also allows me to be fast because my average throughout the track is a little bit on throttle longer, braking shorter, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best example, if people haven't seen it, would be, I think, your second qualifying run in the old St. Louis layout when you threw that like massive backy. I think you were pissed off at something.
I zeroed for some reason. Already. I knew it, so I was like, right. This is for me.
Right. That was But I mean, it's kind of become the thing. Like when like every driver has a certain style and you have a very definitive one. And I mean, you've been pretty vocal about trying to bring that back, like trying not to drive at 10 tenths all the time. Is that something that's gotten better with like age? Is that something that's gotten better with maybe like Vaughn being involved, or like how has that changed from, let's say like 2016 to now?
Yeah, I think it's really a matter of like how you look at it. So for me, it's always been, and it still is, like, how do I do better than my last lap? And that's just a personal battle. It's not like definitive by anybody watching or the judges or any of that. Like my run that I want to improve on might have already been enough to do whatever. But like throughout the weekend, I just want to achieve more, want to drive harder, want to, fix little things. I didn't like this. I thought it wasn't smooth. And then I'll get a video and I'm like, damn, that looked really smooth, like whatever. But for me, it's like rather than back it down, I took some time to drive and kind of more perfect number 10. So that way there's a higher number available, but I'm just not always using that. Does that make sense? So like getting really good at 10. It's
like turning down the boost, right?
Getting really good at 10 might become 8 then.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
And that's kind of been my thing, has always been like, and I obviously still go to 11 every once in a while and blow it or do really good or achieve greatness or whatever. And that's kind of what it is. But my goal, like over the last 2 years, has been like, it's kind of like, I feel like we're doing good in the season. I feel like we've been top 5 for the last few years and whatnot. And like, am I ready to give up the style and what I enjoy most about drifting to maybe win a championship? And for me, the answer is no. And that's maybe not the case for everybody, but for me, I'm like, I have to enjoy this while I'm doing it, or I shouldn't do it.
It's interesting. Like, I apologize to everybody else listening who's like already heard me say this, but it'll be new for you because I know you haven't listened to them. But I'm very curious to see what happens either with judging, because there's obviously the big rule changes coming to judging and how they're changing that system and stuff, which is, I think, fantastic. But we've always had these like massive changes based on drivers coming into the series. Change with James, change with Daigo. I mean, we could even go back like changes with kind of re-stepping up. So my prediction has kind of been with Forrest coming back in, I think you having just another year of comfort, and now kind of the way that the judging style is going to go, and with the new telemetry system, that there's going to be more room for that big angle, for that style, because we're realizing that just because you have a ton of angle doesn't mean you're necessarily slowing down. We're now seeing that that's not necessarily the case. Because we've always thought like, oh, you throw this ton of angle, like, well, that's what I'm hoping, right? Because we had like the super fast days with Daigo, and that was great. And we had the crazy proximity when James came in, so much that they changed judging criteria to try and slow him down. And like all that's really next, in my opinion, is angle. Like that's the next thing to unlock without slowing down the actual run.
For sure. That's kind of always been the wonder, right? For me is like, well, you know, we judge one run, we judge the other run, and like, okay, everybody did great, or everybody made mistakes, or whatever the case is. Doesn't really matter. But like, why has it not been worth it when maybe let's say that both runs are identical, but one driver had 10 degrees more angle for the whole entire track. Like, why does that guy not win? It's always one more time. Or like vice versa. Or maybe the guy who had a little bit more angle made one small mistake than the previous person, but they lose because the angle doesn't bring that up anymore. And I feel like drifting is like so much about the angle. And obviously there's like, I change the way I drive to make sure the judges are happy with what I'm doing. Like if they're ever like, I don't like that, I'm like, okay, we're not doing that. Cause like, then we're here for no reason, that's stupid. But like, typically I'm like, if they don't really care, then I'm going to do it. Like when they said no more backies at Atlanta, I'm like, all right, guess we're not doing any more backies. And then in practice, I do a couple for fun, get them out of the way. I'm like, we're good. And then move forward. But
is that what? Is that one of those like, okay, it's out of my system now. Like we're good.
Because I'm only here once a year in this car, going this fast, doing this stuff. Like I'm gonna get a couple heaters in. Like why not?
One in Rome, right? Like one in Atlanta. Throw a backy down the hill
for sure.
So you don't. I know you're competitive. Like I know you're competitive for sure, but you don't strike me as competitive as a lot of guys. Like I know. I'm not on team radios, but what's been released on team radios publicly shows that you have that drive. But I feel like you're not as forward about it as a lot of guys are.
I mean, the thing is like, and I don't mean any negative from this at all. Like this is just part of the sport, but like,
I'm clipping this immediately.
Yeah, I'm like, how can this is the front line right here. But no, how can you be like insanely competitive and be so focused on winning when like there's not a definitive way to win? And I'm fine with that because that's what drifting is. I used to not be and used to get real upset about it, and I still do every once in a while because I'm like, man, I just wish that there was a better understanding of this, or maybe I had a better understanding of it, vice versa. But I think that for me, it's like whenever I drive to win, I don't enjoy it. I've actually won events like turning it down and like playing the process. And I'm like, oh yeah, I won. And I'm like, but like,
at what cost?
Yeah, the cost of like, I didn't even drive that hard. Like, I feel like I wasn't my best, and I won. And I'm like, sick. Like, I'll take that. And I'm not saying it like, I'm like, another level. I can drive and like win that way. But I'm saying like, there's plenty of events I've been to and I've won by only winning one or two battles because people crash and take themselves out, blow the motors, like whatever. Like in the long game, if you just drive like 75% and play this game smart, like, you're going to do well. I feel like that's where it is when you have good equipment. You've been doing it long enough to have a good enough understanding of it. And you understand how to drive at the limit.
Oh, I lost it there again for a sec. Yeah, we're good. It's all good. I'll blame the Florida internet. There's probably like a crazy rainstorm going on I had no idea about.
There's not, but I kind of live in the boonies, so it's got great here. Just isn't always consistent.
How is it being back in Florida? Because you lived there previously, right?
Yeah, I've lived here a few times. I grew up here. I moved here when I was like 7 or 8, and I lived here till my last year of high school, and then I moved back in 2011 until 2015, and then I moved back again like about 9 months ago now. Gotcha.
And like you did a stint in Texas doing some oil shit, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And then obviously like West Coast stuff. So you've been around.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just like to experience different parts of America and see what it's about and kind of find the place I want to be. And I've kind of always just ended up back in Florida. And I think most of the reason is because the off season is beautiful here. Like from November to March here is like the best of pretty much anywhere. And like, it's not overcrowded and it's pretty good and affordable. So for me, it's like, I enjoy it here. It's so hot during the summer, but guess what? It's so hot everywhere I'm traveling and driving at. So it really doesn't make that much of a difference.
Have you already picked out your favorite Philly cheesesteak to get a whiz with, like while you're there?
Yeah.
Like, was that like part of the reason where you moved where you were? Hey, there's got to be a good whiz with.
Yeah, there's no good cheesesteaks where I live whatsoever. But in Philly, there's Steve's. That's my spot. Steve's Princess Steaks.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes. You gotta have it with the cheese whiz on top. I mean, it's not
whiz with
it's
is
not
my
the same,
move.
right? Yeah. Grilled onions, right?
That's it. Cheese whiz, steak, grilled onions, done.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough, being in Florida without a Philly cheesesteak, but I think you're surviving.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, Florida has a ton of other stuff. There's so many good places to eat down here that I'm not missing it too much. There's a decent cheesesteak place in Orlando too, so I'm not far from there. So.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, don't give away your exact location. We don't need a bunch of FD fans like showing up at your garage.
Nope.
I'm not here to dox you. You're all right. Just Chelsea went and hid in the bush.
I did.
And
That's
no
what I live in the bush, literally. I'm out here.
Yeah. Has it like, I mean, I know like FD is not like F1 level of fame, but like you are very famous within a select community. Has that gotten to you at all? Like, if you had situations where you're like, what the fuck, guys? Like, what? Like, seriously?
Yeah, there's been a few. I'm not like, I'm like not really a people person. Like, I get burnt out of people really quick. If you're watching and I did maybe ignored you while I was walking back to my trailer at an event or something, like, we have an allotted time where I turn my people on and like I enjoy and have a good time and hang out and feel the vibe. Yeah. But like, it's exhausting. And I don't mean it in a bad way. It's just like, you're either about it or not. And I'm not necessarily that guy, but I'm not, when I get recognized like out in public, I'm like, oh, cool. Like, I mean, I'm not like, I'm famous, yay. But I'm like, oh, like people recognize my efforts and like I put a lot of effort into this. So I'm totally fine with like people being like, what's up, man? Like, everybody for the most part, if I'm out, is super respectful kind of thing. And like my places for all of my demographic is Home Depot. That every time I go to Home Depot, someone recognizes me and I'm like, it kind of makes sense. But like you'd think like Outerzone or like an auto parts store.
Yeah.
But no.
You walk in, there's like a poster of you there and you're like, oh yeah.
But I go into Home Depot every time and someone's like, yo, Chelsea, what's up? I'm like, Home Depot's my people. Like apparently. Like
the good hardworking folks, man. That's great.
So funny. So weird.
Of all the places. I was waiting for you to like say something like the music store or something like that. No. It's like every time I go into a music store, everyone's like, oh,
do they
Chelsea.
even have music stores anymore? Not really.
Yeah, I was in one the other day. It's where I bought the
like
mic.
A Sam Ash or something.
I mean, we have a Long and McQuaid. Okay. I'm in Canada, so we have Long and McQuaid, so a little different. Yeah. I mean, on that fun transition, I don't think people realize how much of an audiophile you are. Yeah. Like big into music. I was told a story that you're quite the drummer as well.
I wouldn't say quite the drummer, but I can play okay. I would say I'm like a C grade drummer.
C grade? I mean, if you can carry a beat,
I mean,
right?
like if there was people with a bass and guitar and wanted to jam, like I could jam. Like that's cool. But I'm not like I'm not really gonna impress anyone. It's like not like, damn, he's a ripper on the drums. I'm just gonna play some rhythm and blues and cruise out with it,
And you've got a pretty broad selection of music, like, from like Wu-Tang to like weird indie bands that no one's heard of, like what's one I got here? Modern Allies, Our Fading Smiles, stuff that like nobody's ever heard of.
Yeah, that's some 80s stuff. That's good.
Yeah, some throwbacks, but I mean, I know I'm trying to find stuff that like people wouldn't know about.
Yeah, music is
because
big.
Like everybody.
I mean, I listen to stuff like all the hip hop and a lot of different stuff going on now. But like, big music's always been a big part. I was in a bunch of bands in high school, and my dad was in a band up until a long time. He's actually in Modern Allies, the band that you were just referencing.
Yes,
but so I basically grew up in a recording studio, recording like people from my high school, hip hop artists, like a bunch of different bands and whatnot. And I've always just been like in love with music and felt like that's kind of the timeline of your life, like music timeline is like something that can keep you up or down or hype you up or, get everything cruising along,
Do you have like a hype up song before you get into a car? Or
that would be a bad idea. I am normally just listening to like yacht rock or something before I go out. Yeah, if the team like puts music on the radio that's like super hype, they're like pulling the spares out of the trailer. Like it's going to get really, I got to keep myself chill, dude. Can't turn up, man.
Now I want to see it. Like I might just walk by with a boombox with like just something ridiculous on just to see you get like jamming in the car.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty good at like managing it, but yeah, for sure. Like I would not play like Wu-Tang or something before I went on track. That would be a little too hype. You can't play a club banger when like, you know, you got to be focused.
You're trying to keep it in control. I mean, a grassroots event, I mean, if you've got something that's like lower power, you don't really give a shit about, I could see that. I mean, you know, trashing the RTR Mustangs is a little bit different of a story than the TI or the Fox body. I mean, not that I want to see the Fox body get crashed. I love that thing.
Yeah.
But
well, all those cars, when they break, different. I have to fix all of them. So, you know, there's a little bit of both there. A little bit of balance.
Yeah, but I mean, that doesn't affect me. That affects you. I just want to see you just go hardcore, like, you know, jamming out to something.
I'm normally like driving at 8 to 10 tenths all the time. I don't really drive below that. I find when I drive like 6 or 7 tenths, I don't enjoy it really. So, you know, I really thrive on the hard driving.
You've unlocked a lot in that Fox body, and I mean, I know you're kind of a divisive figure within the Mustang or Fox body community now in particular. Rest in peace, John Duncan.
Oh my God.
But hey, I was in there too. Don't worry. But I mean, I think you took. I wouldn't say that like it was gatekeep knowledge. I mean, it might be however you want to frame it. But like, I think you just went, guys, like, just stop thinking that we know everything about this chassis. And understand that other people have done things with similar chassis that can correlate to this, and you can get a lot more out of it than you think. Like the video about the solid axle setup, like there's shit in there I was not even thinking about. And I mean, I drove an 88 Thunderbird turbo coupe. So essentially, yeah, dude,
the original EcoBoost.
And that was exactly it, right? I mean, I threw like a Duramax turbo on it. It took forever to spool up, but like when it hit boost, man, that thing took off. But yeah, like it's such an old chassis, but people forget that like you can still learn shit even about a, you know, system that's, I mean, what is it now? 40 years old? God, that makes me feel old.
Dude, yeah, 79. Yeah.
Yeah. Whenever I hear 20, I still think 1980 and I know it means 2000.
Yeah, right. I know. It's crazy. It really is like 45-year-old car. Wow. Yeah. Driving a classic.
It's 45-year-old technology. I mean, yeah, you can get classic insurance on Fox bodies now. It's like
mine's like last year though. I think it's a 92 chassis. So I think they made a 93, gotcha. But I think that was it. But yeah, the solid axle thing has been really a fun like endeavor. You know, it's really like if you think about it, like it's exactly what I stand for in drifting, like the simple, effective, strong, reliable setup that's just like very adjustable but easy to relate to the driver. So I feel like so many of the new chassis with 5-link rears and like all these crazy rear suspensions, and they're great for street cars, they're great for even road race cars, but for drifting, the dynamic and the movement of the rear of the car and like all that stuff on these multi-link cars it's just so complex. And when you start messing around with stuff and you move something an inch, like you could move one suspension mounting point an inch and ruin the entire car. Like, you know, and maybe not even understand why. But with a solid axle, it's like, there's like 4 things to move.
It's only so much.
And each one does a ton. Like when you move the lower control arm down 1 hole in the traction arm, it's like a night and day difference. And it's, you know, and that's kind of why I've been making this content and shooting these videos about it, is like, I want to like share these little things that I've learned throughout this, because like I'm active at trying new things and feeling it. That's what I enjoy doing. Like when I go to the track and I'm like swapping springs out, doing wacky stuff, like, cause I just want to see and start adding to the Rolodex of stuff, like what works and what doesn't and what it did. And like, that's why I go to the track. Like for me to go to the track and simply drive is not necessarily why I'm there. Like I like to achieve and figure things out and learn things and kind of elevate it, even if it's just for myself. So I've just been sharing that stuff with people and like what I've learned and keeping it, kind of relating it to someone who isn't an engineer, because I'm not, and like just a driver that works on his car and wants to feel changes, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you've been a huge proponent of just providing knowledge to people. Like, why are we hiding this shit? Why are we not telling people this? Like, what's the benefit in holding this back? Like, no one gains by you retaining this knowledge and never sharing it.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't lose. Like, everyone's like, you give all this information away. I'm like, you still have to figure out how to use it. Like, I could tell you exactly how to do this. But like, and by gatekeeping, maybe like, the only gatekeeping I do is I wouldn't like put the entire setup sheet of my car on the internet, right? And even if I did, like, you probably wouldn't be able to drive it because I drive like an idiot. Yeah. Like, like I drive setups that are way different than what most people drive, And I normally go way too far with everything and then rein it back. So for me, it's like, why? I hate going to events and seeing people struggle. And drifting is the most struggled motorsport, in my opinion. Like, when I go to the track and I see people struggling all day, I'm like, and it's always something so simple to help you become better and like let your car help you be better. That's my whole model is like, like, you're really good at driving, but your car is awful. Like, let it help you be better, Is
that like is people like trying to overdrive their shortcomings in their chassis? Is that like what you're seeing the most?
Maybe, or they have to be nice to the car, or it bites them, or like that's the biggest thing I always see is like, oh, like, why are you pedaling and doing all that? And it's like, oh, like, I have really soft front springs and don't have a sway bar, so the car has no grip at high angle and like whatever, and like so you have no car to lean on, and you're like, okay, like you already have the sway bar on there, hook it back up. And then next time you go to the track, bring some stiffer springs and try them out. And then they'll usually message me, dude, it's like I could drive hard now. I'm like, yeah, like you don't want to drive to not spin. You want to drive to achieve angle. Like that's way more fun.
That's a good way of putting it. I've never, I knew that inherently, but I never actually put that together where it's like, you're driving just for more angle. Like if you can achieve that, then just the not spinning is the part right before you find out how much angle you have.
Well, like when you're a car guy, what's your favorite thing to do? Simplest thing. Put the pedal to the floor.
I like
floor it. Like floor it. Like I get in a rental car, first thing I do, floor it. I get in anything, first thing I do. Even if it's just for a second, like floor it.
Yeah, just to know.
So if you're drifting and you're just dancing on the pedal the whole time, is that more or less fun than just flooring it a bunch? Like flooring it's sick,
For the record, never buy a car from a rental agency that's anywhere near a racetrack. Because, like, I guarantee that car has been beaten and abused or, like, had that handbrake held on the highway. Like, it's had people jump in it. I'm not speaking from experience at all.
Do not buy a rental car,
I've heard
period.
Things.
Ever.
Never. No, never a good time. So how have you been finding, like, the production of all the YouTube stuff? Like, has your wedding video experience helped out at all, or have you kind of just moved on past that and you're full-time YouTuber now?
Yeah, so I have a history of doing cinematography, did a lot of audio stuff, and like worked in New York for a few years and freelance stuff, and I think that makes me a bad YouTuber because I'm just like,
okay.
Oh, everybody just wants this simple thing. Like they don't want anything produced. Yeah. They don't want anything. And I'm like, okay, cool. That's great because I don't have time to produce something that's really big. But also like, I don't really get it still. Like I've been doing YouTube on and off for, I don't know, like 6 or 7 years now, maybe. And I didn't even like monetize it or anything until like, I would say 3 years ago. And I did like all my how to drift videos, all that stuff. And I didn't have like any monetization of it because I, again, was just like, I just want to give back to like make driving better. I hate going to tracks and seeing people drive awful. So what do? Okay, I'm going to go shoot this content, do that. And it ended up being great because back then it wasn't about like the making money. It was the views and the like being able to sell the views kind of thing. And I didn't know the whole deal with YouTube back then, but it's a lot of work. Everybody is like, oh, he's a YouTuber, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, it's a lot of work. Like, it's so much effort. Like, it is a full consumption of your life. Like, I balance it pretty well. I have a dude that comes and helps me shoot stuff, and he does all the editing, and I come up with the concepts, and we just blast through. Sometimes I'll do 3 videos in one day, and then that's it, and then I make sure he's there for every time we're going to do something cool. And I just go about my day and do my stuff. You know, like I shoot these videos like the solid axle video or these educational videos or these podcasts, and they're normally 10 clips for the whole video. You know, it's like lots of talking, lots of explaining, walking around, doing stuff. And that's kind of been what I feel like is good for my channel, my lane. But it's a lot of work, and it doesn't pay what people think it pays whatsoever. And the problem is too is like, you know, if you live a life and you're doing YouTube and that's your main source of income and your main everything, like you're living it, you're doing it. Whereas like that is like almost, I don't want to use the term burden, but like financially it makes very little sense for me to do YouTube. You know, I think maybe in the long run it'd be great. But I think for me, like it's an investment where maybe hopefully I'm not losing money doing it, but it's an investment in growing something that's going to be around for a while. It also timestamps my life and things that are going on. And like later on when I want to go back and be like, oh, what was that car like? Like I could have it there or like share it with people or whatever, you know? So I don't know. I'm kind of just like doing the YouTube thing because I think it makes sense to do it at this point, you know, kind of riding the wave a little bit of it.
It is nice to have those like memories back. Like I come from video work and YouTube stuff, and it's like I'll get memories that come up of just like, you know, I'll take my kids to the park and just bring a camera with me and like make like a 1-minute edit, and they'll like show up on a memory, and I'm like, man, that's so like nice to have. And then I think back to like when I was a kid and my grandfather had like a video camera stuck in my face like every day, and I'm like, okay, what's that now? I talked to my grandma recently. She's like, I have everything.
That's cool.
I have every tape. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I'm like, can I get those? Like, I want to digitize those. Like, I want to go look at like 6-year-old me playing hockey or like the Christmas concert in 4th grade, that kind of shit. So like, you don't realize it at the time. And then when you want that hit of nostalgia, it's like to have it is so nice.
Yeah, for sure.
For nothing else, right?
Exactly. And like I said, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, especially in the off season, I can be heavy on it because we're not really producing content. I'm not gone every weekend. There is some time for it. So I've just been, you know, it's really been a value proposition and seeing if there's something there and if it's worth it. And my thing is like, as long as I'm not going to lose money, like I don't need to make any money doing it, but as long as I'm not going to lose money, I'll keep, you know, doing, right now we've been doing two videos a week, releasing on Saturday and Wednesday. So
7.3 video just came out, which is sick. I had an 89 F250 with a 7.3 in it. So the non-turbo one. IDI, so it was just an absolute dog. Dude, it's absolute dog. It would drive through anything though. You could pour straight engine oil in that diesel tank and it would just run. So nice.
Yeah, they were really simple back then. This is like a 97 Power Stroke. So, but it's in a Bronco. My wife's wanted a Bronco for a long time. And I'm just like, well, what are you going to do with it? Like, you can't tow with it because like, the 302 or the 351. 351's enough to tow with, but it's still like 6 miles to the gallon.
And it's like under 80% load, just driving flat with anything on it.
And I'm like, I have a truck. When you want to go to the track and do whatever, you just take that. She's like, I really want a Bronco. And they're like, gonna get crazy expensive. And they already have been getting that way. And I'm like, oh, we'll just wait for one that's cool. Like maybe we'll find a Centurion, like the 4-door one. Or like maybe we'll find like a, you know, different, like a Eddie Bauer cool like project one. And originally we were going to buy one and put an EcoBoost in it, like just a 2.3 with like a Ranger drivetrain in it. So we still have 4-wheel drive and a 6 or a 10-speed auto and all that. And then we found this 7.3 one and I'm like, dude, this is like the best.
The complete opposite end.
It's like the best because like they don't ever break. Like, and
I mean, minus some sensors.
Right. So you just keep a crank sensor in the glove box.
Just like 1/2 inch bolt to take out, right?
And like, that's it. It's good. And I'm like, it's perfect for her because I'm like, it could be leaking. It could be like all sorts of jacked up and it doesn't care. It'll always run.
No. If it's leaking, it just means it has fuel. It has oil in it. That's all it means.
Horsepower sweating anyway, so it's fine.
Yeah. That's what I tell my wife. I've got a 24 valve Cummins in the driveway that leaks everywhere. And I'm like, babe, it just means I don't need to do an oil change. It's just constantly
just put a filter every 5,000 and keep adding oil.
That's basically it. Yeah, it's great.
They all leak. Like I got a F350 OBS with a Cummins in it, and it just leaks everywhere. And like you can't stop it from leaking. Like they just always,
because you stop at one spot, it just goes somewhere else. So you just find a spot that you're okay with it leaking from, and you stick with it. Like That's my oil leak. So weird question. Mm-hmm. How hard is it to figure out whose mail comes in every day?
We just open it and deal with it.
Do you just together?
No, she'll just be like, I opened it. Here's your stuff. Like, here's all your toll bills from whatever state you were driving through or whatever. That's normally that's like half my mail. Because I'll go to these states and it's like, oh, it's toll by plate, over and over again. So it's not, I think it's, I mean, I don't know. Everything's electronic now anyway. We don't even get a lot of mail. It's more like when someone calls on the phone, and you're like which one, or whatever. So.
Hey, I mean, it's convenient. You just have to remember one name. Props to you. Yeah. I'm sure. Like in the beginning, people were like, "Seriously?" And you're like, "Yeah, no joke. This is what's going to happen."
This works.
And she's going to have my last name too. It's like she's going to have my last name soon too.
True. That's how it went. Exactly.
Yeah. So let's. I want to hit like the big news item, which obviously is James jumping on board. So this obviously has been a discussion far longer than what people probably know. And I mean, you and I both have insider information on this, so I think we both have to be careful. But I guess, are you allowed to talk about when you found out it was happening? And then, or if not, what were your thoughts when you got told that James is jumping on?
Yeah, so for the last, year or even a little bit longer, I've been kind of managing that end of things anyway. And Vaughn and I have been working really, really close together at, actually it's been longer than that because even with the Adam thing and all that, it's, right. I think that it's more of, I get this kind of ran through beforehand to make sure it will work with me kind of thing, which is Vaughn has been super helpful with. And he's like, hey, if we work with this person, is that going to work with you? Because if it doesn't, then this doesn't really work.
Like a vibe check, basically.
I'm pretty down for whatever, as long as it makes sense. It's not like everybody's like, oh, they need to find a driver. They want to find a driver. They should find whoever needs it the most kind of thing, or whatever the case is. And it's like, yeah, I think that's part of it for sure. But there's a lot of business on the back end of it that has to make sense, because this is the program's not cheap. The partners that we work with are, big companies that expect things to go at least a certain way organically. And it's a big process. Yep. And I think we talked about James. It probably would have been around before Irwindale last year, maybe. And that was when we were like, hey, it can happen. Let's have this conversation, And it makes sense from Vaughn's point to have the conversation with me. And there were other drivers that we spoke about. And obviously James is extremely decorated and a ripper. And it kind of fits the bill of everything. And on the back end of the business aspect, it works as well. So it kind of just made sense. And James wanted to come back. He loves driving over here. And he's so pumped. It's hilarious. I want to talk to him during testing, and he's like, I'm so pumped to come back and drive Formula D. I'm like, this is so cool. It's not a thing where it's oh, I want to drive FD. What team do I drive for? RTR's best. I got to drive for them. Okay, done. It's it's just a passionate thing, and he loves it,
Is that at any point did you have pause with this where you're kind of holy shit, this is arguably the greatest drifter of our generation, if not ever. I mean, on a decoration count, sure. There's nobody who can touch him. But are you saying that fuck, I got to perform. This is, because that, I mean, for me, if somebody, let's say somebody brings in a co-host and this guy's just crushing it and I look like an idiot over here, I'm going to sit there and be like, oh my God, I don't think my job's in jeopardy, but every single time I get on the track, this is going to be the comparison.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing we talked about earlier. For me, it's the most important thing for me is I got to be happy with my driving. If I'm happy with my driving, it doesn't matter if I'm losing or winning or doing whatever. For me, that's the most important part for the physical.
In a silo.
In my mind, mentally, if I'm doing what I want to do and I'm achieving what I want to do, simple or complex, I'm pumped on it. And with the James thing, what I'm most pumped about, obviously James and I are friends, and I'm pumped to have him in the trailer and have a good time, and
he's just a generally nice guy too. Like he's like legitimately nice human being
for sure. But what I'm kind of most pumped about is like I've been working on this car and getting this car dialed with the RTR team, and like I've been working off of everything I feel and the important things to me, right? Because if I want to change 10 things on the car, I have to narrow it down to 2 of the most important things. We fix those, and then we move forward. So sometimes things get like, I don't want to use a term like swept under the rug, but they're not as important as some other things that have happened, right? Oh, no. Right. Light down.
What'd you do? Oh, no.
Let me fix this real quick.
We can take a minute. We'll pause.
It just fell.
I got it.
Can you clamp it on there?
No, I can't.
Okay. I just watched it knock everything over, too. It was like worst case scenario. We're good. We're back.
Perfect.
My life is in shambles.
I'm going to leave that in.
No.
I'm leaving that in.
Yeah, it's fine. You should see this rig right now. It's awful. It's hilarious.
Dude, send me a picture after.
God.
I'm excited.
I would fire myself if I was the video guy or the grip of this scenario.
The grip. Hey, look at you.
But yeah, so I'm going to jump back in. Where were we at?
The things kind of swept under the rug you're excited about.
So these things now that are important to James, right? He's a very different driver than me. Like almost, I would say, polar opposite of how things are attacked. I say we have similar style. We drive lots of angle, lots of throttle. Like some of the things that are really important for like my driving style, he does as well. So that's going to be great. But he's going to find some things that are important and like reiterate some of that so that we can improve that, which will then improve it for me as well, right? And I think me knowing the car really well and him being someone who's really tied to the car, we'll be able to kind of work together to get benefit on both of our driving, I think it'd be cool.
Yeah, in Vaughn's vlog, you were kind of like saying like, hey, like it's going to understeer at this point, but as soon as you get to this much angle, it's going to grab you again. So like
push
just
through it.
Be ready for that. Right. Yeah. Get ready for that understeer. And then don't worry, it's going to be there on the other side of it. So I mean, without getting into like, I guess, whatever details you can, like what's different? I remember him very much playing with gearing to get his throttle right on banks and things. So he could just kind of like, hey, I just want to put my foot down, be close to the rev limiter, and then just steer the car where I need to. Like I very, very much remember him doing that on bank tracks. Is that like, is he more focused on gearing as opposed to suspension stuff? Or like where does he make his adjustments, I guess?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are always adjusting the gearing or the rev limiter, or just when we say gearing, it's more just wheel speed in general, however you achieve it and change it. But yeah, I think he's a lot more of a steering driver and putting the car where it needs to be with the wheel, or at least keeping it in the box and balanced with the wheel. So I think he and I might be wrong, but just from what I've learned, it looks like he's more focused than I am or Vaughn is on what the front end is doing versus the rear. So like in our cars, we're doing a lot of creating a lot of speed, a lot of grip and whatnot from what the front end does. And that's just like, a lot of people are doing that, but our car is a little bit more than others need that. And that's how they work. So for him, I think it's going to be just some getting used to in terms of the way the steering works. And I think also we're going to need to change some things to make him happy and learn some things so that we can apply it. Because a lot of the things that he had an issue with testing, and maybe not even an issue, he just had questions about.
Just notes, yeah.
Were things that I'm like, yeah, you're right, it does do that. And we've been working through finding a solution that doesn't also kill our competitiveness, Because it's all a balance. You got to have it balanced. The car's got to be balanced for the driver. Sometimes we'll free my car up and make it looser and I get faster in it, just because I'm more comfortable and it's not so hooked up that, I'm tied down to it. So it's an art, really. It's a balance of all that. And that's, I think, why we've had so much success with our team is the team is just on it. We know the car well. We've been driving these cars for a long time and we're always developing and figuring out whether it's we do something and it's worse, we learn from it. we do something that's better, we learn from it, you know?
Sometimes you learn more from the mistakes than you do from the success. Because like if you get the success, you're kind of like, okay, well, everything just went well, so we do that again, I guess. Whereas like usually if it's a mistake, it's pretty clear what the problem was. And then you're like, okay, never do that again. Moving on.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, James really, like, there's been very few chassis he's jumped in that he hasn't been almost immediately competitive with. I mean, I know he struggled a little bit with the Eurofighter, but not much. I mean, that the FD is, he did incredibly well in that. And then the S15s, like, you know, the only weird thing with the S15s was, like, I've never seen a car rotate the way that they did. Like, there was, I don't know how they did it, but, like, it seemed to rotate dead center, like almost on his handbrake, like so consistently. And I remember watching that because like comparing that with like Odie and being like, well, hang on, Odie's rotating at like the firewall, and then James and Piotr are like rotating next to them. Like, how the hell are they doing this? And then it was just weird to see.
Yeah, I think it's more just the attack angle and when you transition and the timing of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know previously, like with the S15s and whatnot, they got those dialed pretty quick. And I know they've been driving them for a long time, similar to how we've been with the Mustangs now. But I know they weren't changing a ton in between, you know, runs and laps there. They were pretty much showing up all in and driving them how they were all the time, you know.
Do you prefer that as well? Like, you know, kind of pick a setup and just like, you know, change one or two things and that's about it? Just more drive and make those decisions as opposed to like a big chassis like change?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, typically how we show up off the trailer and it may be 5% variance of where we show up off the trailer. Unless we're going to a new track and we're just kind of like looking at it, figuring the track out, deciding where our baseline is, like then we might make a ton of changes, you know. But like at Utah this year, it was the track surface was really, really grippy and we weren't expecting that.
Yeah.
The surface was insane. Like the grip at that track was probably 15 or 20% more than any other FD track out there. And it just kept rubbering down and hooking up more and more and more. And the elevations, like lack of power and other things. So it just all compounded to basically having to free the car up a ton in comparison to where we came up off the trailer. But most of the other tracks we've got a setup that's pretty close. And, you know, it could win basically off the trailer.
And that's just based off of notes from previous years or decisions? Like, I'm assuming there's a good log of like, here's what we did and how it felt, and this is what we want to do again.
Yeah, and we discussed it before we go to the track. Like, I'm like, hey, last year it worked out great, but what I've noticed this year is people are doing this different. So we need to adjust the car, and it could be a problem here. So let's do this or that or something to, you know, kind of make it an easier car to drive. Most of the changes that we're doing are not to speed the car up or to make a change that's going to make us more competitive. It's more of a change that is making the driver happier and so they can achieve more. Like that's really most
just
of it.
More comfort.
And this Mustangs are such a great chassis in the aspect of adjustment. Like the smallest little adjustments go so far. So we really have a huge range of like removing or adding grip from any end of the spectrum.
Do you think that as they come down in price too, that's going to be like the next big chassis that people are going to be investing in?
I feel like they're so good for the money. Like when you look around at other stuff in like the 10,000 range, there's not a lot that's like got all of the boxes checked. Like you can go rent one from a rental car place and all of them have limited slips. They all have it. They all have good, well, even if it's an auto.
We're not condoning.
No, I'm just saying.
Getting a rental and taking it to the track.
Whatever, have fun, dude. Do you?
I've seen it happen. Yeah.
But the transmissions, like even if you buy an auto, the transmissions are great. Like the diffs, the motor, like the Coyote motor is indestructible. It is crazy. Like the only failure point is like if you're revving it really high, the oil pumps, and those are cheap and easy to like get a better one in there, and that's it. Like the whole rest of the car is like, it's so indestructible. You can crash into all types of shit and it just takes it. And like, they're adjustable from the factory, a lot of it. And like now with a simple steering kit, like you can take a completely stock Mustang, put a steering kit on it and shred.
Yeah, I'm curious. Like, I mean, I've seen more and more of them pop up, and I mean, you guys have really popularized them to a pretty good extent. It's just, I mean, I still see probably more adoption with the Corvette, and than anything. And then the BMWs are still kicking around. Eventually, they're going to basically become like S13 style, where you just can't find them, and people want $14,000 for a shell. Crazy. Like, which, yeah, like don't get me wrong, great chassis, but like. For $14,000 for a shell, like you said, you can go get a ready to go Mustang, and that's going to do everything. And more.
I would even say like the Corvette's a good car as well. I don't think it's as reliable as the S550 chassis. Like I see every time. I think Drift Week is a really good testament on like reliability of things. And like my S550 and all the other S550s I've seen in there, one of them lost an oil pump and lost a motor, but like it has been insane the abuse they take without any sort of servicing. And like every time on Drift Week, it's like Corvette with a blown up torque tube, Corvette with lost a whole front left wheel assembly, like, and caved everything. Corvette lost a motor. Corvette broke a diff, and like you break a diff on that, it's a disaster. And I'm not like talking smack. I think again, it's like the same thing. $10,000 gets you a V8 car that has a strong drivetrain, good power, parts are available everywhere. I think it's a good basis. I think the one thing the Corvette might have on the Mustang is it's a little bit lighter. But everything in the durability department and the drivability department, I still think the Mustang's king. And the cost, like you don't have to do anything to the Mustang. Like the Corvette still needs quite a bit of things. Like when I see people building them out that they're spending money on.
Would you, I mean, like right now, let's say something happens, you say something stupid in this podcast, your contract gets severed. I'm not making any predictions here, but would you still like immediately go out and get another Mustang to compete in? Or would you go back to a BMW?
Dude, I'd jump right in my Fox
look
body,
at something else completely.
I would, if I,
Really?
let's say RTR is like, you're out, you're done. I'd be like, well,
yeah,
I need one of the, as a severance, I need one of the motors from our FD cars, just one of them. And I'd put that in my Fox body and go to FD in it.
On like an open trailer just to make everybody angry?
It's not.
It's a troll.
It's not simple to do FD on an open trailer. It's too much effort. You just need like a single enclosed with some racks over top of the car and a bumper tow trailer, like simple. Yeah. I think that would be probably the route I would go. Because I just love driving the Fox body. Like it's going to sound dumb, but it's like such a magical like car. It just
there's something about them.
And it fits my driving style so good. Like it limits me where I need to be limited, and it helps me where I need help, and it's fast and it's simple, and the cost of running it is so low that it's enjoyable. Like for me, when I go to the track and I got to run a car and it's really expensive to run, the stress of the cost and the stress of anything happening and the value of it, like, makes it so much less enjoyable for me. Like, It's just personally, that's me. Like, I don't have body kits on my car. I don't have any of that stuff because if I hit a cone and break a bumper, like it makes me upset. And I'm like, I got to fix that. And I think about the 10 hours of taking the bumper off, fixing it, painting it, doing all that, instead of just driving and having fun. So like the Fox body fills the void so good. It's like super durable, it's super lightweight, it's super low cost. And like if something breaks on it, it's so easy to get parts. Like it's, and I think an FD, like, I think I could have like a 600 horsepower motor in that thing and do well at FD. Like,
I mean, clutch kickers and the one shootout. Like, I mean, I think you kind of proved that you can have a ton of horsepower, you can have big tires, but like, I'm still gonna run your door the whole time.
It just works so good. Like those guys at clutch kickers when I ran were putting tires on their car every 3 or 4 laps, and I would drive the whole day, like practice, qualifying, tandem battles, like all of it, and never touch or change my tires. Like same set. I would like rotate the right one to the left and the left to the right because it would be like, wearing one more than the other. And I get 25 laps out of a car, like dooring everyone.
Hey, everybody, Jacob here from the Formula Drift podcast. We have an awesome deal for you. So if you head over to shopfd.com and use coupon code podcast23, you're going to save 20% on any merch. So anything you can find on that website, use podcast23, at shopfd.com. Save yourself 20%. Hats, shirts, lanyards, whatever. Just use the code. Save yourself some money. So why not? Don't stop listening. Wait till the show's done. But then head over, shopfd.com, use podcast 23. We'll see you guys out there. Do you think like anybody will do that? Or are we in such of like kind of like a dick measuring contest now with FD cars that
be in a car that's not capable? Like even at the lowest cost teams, you look, they're still making the same power as we are. They might be having more problems. They might be whatever. Like, I don't, there's lots of scenarios to it, but everybody's like, I need 900 horsepower. Why even show up if I don't have 900 horsepower? And I'm like, I think the tires are part of the thing. Like, because all the manufacturers are making really big tires. So you have to weigh a certain amount. And when you have to weigh a certain amount, you got to make a certain amount of horsepower, which is why, again, like this low weight, low everything cost car build was kind of an important thing for me, because I hadn't built a competition car since when I drove FD. My last competition car,
the BMW,
was 2014, the E46. And I was like, I want to build a car that I can drive and compete in. I want it to be a Ford, so I'm doing a lot of stuff with Ford, and I wanted to be a solid axle. So like, I was like,
oh, that was like a choice.
Yeah, for sure. Because I wanted to learn it and understand it and like be better at it. And I think like on paper, I think it's the best rear suspension for drifting. Now, there's plenty of problems with it, but on paper, to me, I think it's the best for at least my driving style. But so like building this car out to be competitive was like, how do I build a car that I could go drive with pro cars that only costs like $500 to $1,000 a weekend to run, which is like
just crazy,
a tenth of what all the other cars cost to run, And I built it off of all the spares and like used parts I had in the shop from the FD program, from like all that stuff, and just built it to make sense and be cheap and
leaving RTR with your pockets full. You're like, we didn't need this, right? Like,
and so basically, I was like, cool, that's the point of it, and it works. Like I like when we go to testing, I'm bringing my Fox body because I want to run my Fox body with FD cars, and I want to see how it does.
I can't wait for that.
Because I feel like
I can't wait for that.
It's all scalable,
just to see.
Like,
so it's not gonna have a ton of smoke, and it may not have like a shitload of angle, but like it'll be there.
And that's kind of the point. Is like, I'm always trying to find ways like for me to enjoy and have fun and not spend a ton of money. And I think obviously the cost of drifting is always a discussion. And like, obviously the FD is the cost of FD is the cost of FD. Like there's ways it could be,
which I think you have to have, but I mean,
it's an entry barrier.
I think you have to have that. Yeah. But like, it's like, I don't ever want someone to go broke drifting. And I mean, you and I could have a conversation about people doing that right now. And a lot of people doing that, not even in FD, just in general. But I always feel like you need to have some sort of pinnacle, like something that is ridiculous, but like still seems achievable in order to motivate people to continue to progress through those like middle stages.
For sure.
Like there has to be an F1 to have karting. There has to be a NASCAR to have your weekly track meets. Like there has to be an FD to have, grassroots. And a lot of it too is like, would we have some of the tires we have if it wasn't for FD? Would we have the parts that we have now if it wasn't for FD? Right? Like would there be the fun haver angle kit if there was no FD?
Right. No, I agree. I'm with it 100%. Like I think it all stems down or up or however you want to look at it as the epicenter of like the FD thing and guys who are driving fun events that the information from FD and the parts development and the the knowledge and the marketing and all of it trickles down, or up or however you want to look at it, whatever the most important part of drifting to you is, it's all going to stem from people that are pushing the limits and trying to do that. And FD is a great place to do that, And I mean, I think there's ways to make it a little bit more affordable. but like the thing is like, does it need to be? Like we have a 32 car field. Like there's enough different cars. There's enough, like that's the argument. Like there's two ends of it.
Yeah.
I've been like, oh, hey, like it should be cheaper. How do I make it more cheap? How do we do this? How do we do that?
Yeah.
Like, how do we save people money? And then on the other end of it, I'm like, well, we also don't need like 100 cars showing up to drive FD.
And those have both been issues,
Right.
right? We've seen both ends of that where we're running a 26 car field, and then we've seen,
80.
you know, in the beginning when it was like, exactly.
I remember going to Long Beach
like 2
in
days of qualifying.
2012 and being like,
Okay.
I got to make top 32. And I'm like, 50 people are going home. Like 50 people showed
crazy.
up, spent all this effort, money, and all that stuff, and they're going to go home. I'm like, when I qualified, I was like, I made it. Like, you know, it's like, woo. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's the same scenario. It's like there's got to be a build up to it. You know, you got to be able to achieve it. And there's guys running FD for probably, you know, 70 to 100 grand a year. And there's people spending $1 million a year, you know?
I mean, I think the best example is like Jonathan Hurst has been very open with how little money he spends in FD. But I mean, there's a big difference between, you know, catering at a truck and then going to get Chili's every day, right? I mean, nothing against Chili's. I've learned to love it. But like, there's a huge difference in that. And is he competitive? Yeah. Does he make over 1,000 horsepower? Yeah. Is that car insane? Yeah. And then, you know, there are guys who are spending a shitload of money who maybe aren't as competitive as that. So like, I don't think it necessarily matters.
Right.
It definitely helps, right? It definitely helps to have that money. Like, you know, better flights, better hotels, not having to worry about cooking food, not having to worry about changing tires or having someone just to do that. As a driver perspective, I assume that just allows you to focus on the goal of driving and not worrying about like, okay, we got to check, like, did I book the hotel? When's my guys coming in? Like somebody just deals with that. Like you don't have to worry about eating or getting food.
Right.
Like I'm assuming, I don't know, maybe like Vaughn's under a tighter budget this year, but like that's not something you have to worry about. You just have to worry about how is the car feeling? How am I feeling? And how am I going to compete?
Yeah,
That's
and
it.
it's all scalable too, because like it all comes down to the same deal. It's like you used Jonathan Hurst as an example. Like he does have a really competitive program for the money, but there's a lot of like economy of scale for him. It's like he does a lot of the work himself. Like he has a shop that, you know, helps pay for that. And I've even talked to him about it. He's like, yeah, I did the whole season for, I forgot what he said it was, but I was like, okay, but what about this? I'm like, so over the next, or in the past 5 years of trying to get here, like you've spent all of this money and rolled it over and grown it, right? Because you're good at that. You hustle, you get that, you know what you do. I did the same thing, like still doing the same thing. Oh, yeah. I'm like, so like,
still selling parts on eBay?
And you're like, it's not really, let's use an example. It's not really $50,000. It's really 80 or 100. And he's like, no. And I'm like, here's the other 30 or 40 or 50 grand. He's like, oh, you're right.
You're forgetting about
like there is that. But it just flows with it and grows with it kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, and it's some of it's like hidden costs of like working late at night or taking time that you could be doing, you know, other work like that. Costs
don't ever calculate
money.
That into the equation. We're all broke if you do that.
Sweat hours. If you calculate sweat equity, yeah, it's wild. I mean, I think you're a good example of that though, of putting in that equity for a long time. I mean, realistically, XDC stuff, you know, working through that, a couple of crazy driver shift things. Like you lost a car halfway through, had to drive an RX-8, like halfway through a season, figure that shit out. Like, you know, I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, realistically, your kind of breakthrough moment would be 2016 Long Beach, taking out like every heavy hitter on that list, right? Like Daigo, Jeff Stoneback, Vaughn, Chris Forsberg. I feel like somebody else, but like that to me would have been your like, holy shit, like this is it. This is the thing I was supposed to do.
Yeah, for sure. That was definitely a breakthrough moment. We had some before that too. We just had so many mechanical problems and like I said, I'm not a good mechanic, right? And I was the one crew chief in my car. So like I had the great theory, but the execution wasn't great. But yeah, it was good. It was like solidification, you know, it's like, oh, we got the win. We knew that we could do it. We had the proper car. We had everything, but it all had to align. And that's the thing that's like the hardest part is like, I used to not even think about the driving aspect ever. You know, like before I drove with RTR, it was always just like find the setup and then just figure out how to drive it in 5 laps and park the car. Like that was like that's my entire model was
really?
Like, okay, we're going to Atlanta. Cool. This turn, set up the car, kill mode, rip right off the trailer, put your 5 laps in, get pumped, park it, watch, pit, like go over the car, whatever, to keep the costs down, right? Because every lap you do, keep the cost more and more and more. And then go out and qualify and be like, okay, if I get higher than a 90, I'm just not going to take my second run. Like the driving was like the minimum of it. And like when we won Long Beach, it was funny because like I forgot how they did it, but they didn't have qualifying because the weather was so bad. It poured rain and it's over top of a parking lot and it made it undrivable. Like people were crashing every lap because there's all the oil from the parking spaces. So basically, long story short, I think I did 4 practice laps and then won the event, and I didn't get any one more times. So like I won the whole event by driving like something like 12 laps or 13 laps, like total. And
Wild.
Kevin was like, yeah, you just won the event with the least amount of laps of anybody here. I was like, yeah, that's been my life for the past like 3 years. And I'm like, I just drive the bare minimum, you know? So I never focus on driving, but now in the RTR team, I've been able to focus on driving, and I think I've grown myself a ton. Like when I drive other cars I've driven previously, it's just like jump in, rip, do what I need to do, you know, show up and blow up, and it's been really, really good. So being able to focus on driving and myself and what I love about drifting has been the biggest game changer for that, for sure.
Would you say there's more stress now with this program? Because like I don't know if people truly understand like the level of commitment, like the additional things you have to do, the signings, the shoots, the meetings, things like that. Is that like a 1-to-1 trade-off with, once again, just trying to figure out how to get tires, or is it different? Is it just a different kind of stress now, or less?
Yeah,
or,
it's
like what's
it's
that
more
like?
of just it's so much easier to focus on things and like maybe focus on them too much or too little or whatever. Before it was just like head down, get done what you need to get done, work, bust your ass until you get there, and then relax when you drive the rig home. And now it's like there's a lot more planning, a lot more deliverables, a lot more things I need to do while I'm at the track that are not related to driving, which is fine because it's usually pretty simple tasks. Like it's just time consuming stuff. I don't really get that stressed out of the track anymore. Most of the time I'm stressed out about something and I'm like, why am I even stressed out about that? It's like not even something that's worth being stressed out about. And I kind of like talk myself off the ledge kind of thing. But before I wouldn't even have time to think about that. I would just be like 8 out of 10 stress all the time, no matter what, except for like 1 week a year when I go on vacation and turn my phone off. Where now it's like a 6, and that's about it all the time. It's like same thing. Like show up at the track, I know my shit's handled, my car's gonna be great. We've already talked about it. Everything we talk about is gonna go through. Like the changes we made and confirmed are gonna be in the car. Like everything's dialed, confirmed. Like I never ever think about the car. Like the car has let me down, like, I think once in the past, like, 5 years, which is, like, a billion times less than my other car let me down. So
yeah, I was going to say, you were getting let down multiple times in a weekend at one point, let alone, like, one time in 5 years.
It's only a letdown when you push it into the trailer. Like, when the weekend's over, you're fighting your battle, you're going to war, you're not focused on anything. But at the end of the weekend, when you're done and you're pushing it in a trailer, that's a letdown. You're like, damn.
That's defeating.
But it's been good.
That's a heavy.
Cars have been great. The team's been great. Like it's the stress. Like it is different, but it's mainly just a lot less.
How, like, could you see yourself just driving for RTR forever? Is there like any ambition to try it again solo with everything marketing, business wise now? Because I feel like I'm not asking for your change here and like to disclose contracts, but like, you probably have picked up so much business marketing knowledge and like program knowledge through the osmosis of working for RTR. Like, do you ever get that tingle to be like, fuck, if I just did this myself, I could do this with that kind
I
of thing.
think it's a grass is always greener on the other side scenario. You know, like there's obviously no matter what you do, nothing's perfect, right? And I'll think about things and be like, oh, I would have done this differently. And then like, I'm like, but like, really? Does it matter? Also, I think we're all going to fight to the same end, you know, the same progression or the same, you know, whatever. And typically that's where I'm at. I kind of am like, I don't like this. I would have done this differently. Like, hey, Vaughn, like, I think I would do this differently. Like, we don't need to, but, you know, I just want to discuss it and just like, you know, keep it in the back of your mind. And, or maybe there's a something that makes sense, you know? And typically it's always like somewhere met in the middle or work through it or figure it out or, you know, whatever the case is. And everything's, you know.
Well, it's work. Yeah. I mean, it's business at the end of the day, right? Like, I think people forget that, especially at where you're at in your career. Like, these are business transactions. You are working for a company. Your email is an RTR email. Like, that's a very specific thing that you are doing.
Yeah, for sure. But I think too, like there's not a better team to work for in the long run. Like for me at least, because like we vibe really well together. When there's a problem, like I'm pretty open and just talk about it, and it never even becomes a problem because someone's like, oh, Chelsea doesn't like this or whatever. Let's discuss it. Like, and as a team, we overcome it and you know move forward with it and vice versa. When you know, just like anything, one of your guys on your team or I'm friends with all of them, when there's something that's not perfect, like let's work through it, let's make it perfect. Like, and it like in the grand scheme of things, like there's not a better group of dudes. Like that's it. Like we talk about this all the time, and I'm like, and you know everybody's like, oh, you got to have a team meeting and stoke everybody up, and I'm just like, guys, you're the baddest mother effers out here. Like we are the best. Like there's no, like, even if maybe we don't win this weekend, we work together so good, and there's 20 dudes that would all do anything for the other person on the team. And like that, like I've worked for companies with 20, 40, 50, 60 employees. I've never seen that in my life. Like there's always somebody who talks shit about someone or doesn't like someone or like, oh, ding dong did this and messed us all up or whatever. And like, there's such little of that with the program that like, it's like really, it's to watch it is like an emotional thing. Like when you sit back and just kind of look at it, you know, when we went to testing, I didn't drive at all. You know, I just watched our team do everything. And like, I've seen Vaughn do that last year, come to the track and just watch, you know, give us feedback, jump in, annoy me a little bit, you know, like whatever the case is. But like, I got to see that testing for the first time, and I'm like, dude, these are the most badass dudes ever. Like, it's crazy. I can't even.
That's a cool moment.
It's so cool. It's like, so like the question that you were asking is like, am I going to go do this on my own? No, this is it. I'm RTR to the end, basically. Because I think if it's done or something happens or whatever, like, I think I would probably take a year off and assess what the next thing to do is. You know, like I've done this for a long time. I obviously won a championship. I want to do that. You know, I want to get it. But I think I don't know that it gets better than the RTR program. Like and I'm someone who's always trying to achieve the next thing and turn it up even more. And I don't know. I think it's good. If it was an 8 out of 10, we would have a discussion. It'd be a 10 the next hour, you know? So it's good.
Do you guys have any like rituals or anything else? I've heard that you were very particular about your glove placement, but I wasn't sure if there was anything else.
I would prefer not to wear gloves. If I could drive FD in shorts and a t-shirt, I just want a good helmet and a good Hans. I'm ready. Like, I don't have any like weird things like that. Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you were like superstitious or
it's
or
like
anything
the
like
little
that.
things. You're like, oh, my glasses are crooked in my helmet. Like I need that to be like decent.
Right.
And like just stuff that would annoy pretty much anyone. My hair is like not down in back of my helmet. It's in my face. Like just like I'll make adjustments for silly shit like that. But no, I don't really have anything. I actually prefer to like ignore all of those types of things and just, if I could get in the car and magically be strapped in and just go to the burnout box. And before that, I'm just bullshitting with everybody and talking and having a good time.
And
that's just like my go. I'm like, I don't want to sit and chill in the car. It's more just like go shred, hang out with your boys, get the car set up, shred some more.
Just try and take it as much like a grassroots event as possible is what it sounds like.
Yeah, because like, and I'm not saying this in like a bragging way, but like I've been doing this so long and been, driving so many different cars, so many different tracks, so many different everything. Like the only thing I think about, like, and Vaughn's even discussed this with me, and like I agree 100%, is like you just got to get into the first turn. You've been doing this forever. It's like you don't think in the morning like how you're gonna get out of your bed and like start walking. Or like whatever the case is. You don't think when you back out of your driveway that you've been backing out forever, you look to see if there's a car there. You do the same thing every day. You don't question how you turn or how you're going to back out of it. You just do it. And like, I've been driving for 20 years and trying to achieve greatness every lap. So why would I not just keep doing that?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, at this point, it's just instinctual and muscle memory, right? I mean, even with the new track, you're like, oh, this layout reminds me of this thing. Okay, I did this here, so I'll do that and see how that works. And, by lap 2 or 3, you're just kind of, working. Do you get into that like flow state, or like, are you even acknowledging that time, or is it one of those like lights and then you're like, oh, okay, cool. How did I do?
No, I'm pretty like analytical about every little aspect of it.
Okay.
Probably to a flaw at this point, but like, I just like, it's 3 turns. Like one track has 4 turns. Like, I don't know. Like the biggest thing about drifting is you only get one chance. That's it. There's not another lap.
Yeah.
Like when it's time to go, you got to be your greatest. And there's not like, oh, I can fix it next lap. Or I can fix it next turn. That's it. You just got to be.
You can't fix it next turn.
You got to be good.
That's the crazy part.
Like, and when you blow it, and that's it. Like,
What are you using to review? Like, obviously, you have the mental capacity to understand your mistakes, but are you watching like a lot of in-car? Are you getting stuff from videographers from the outside to be like, hey, did you get a shot of the front wheel? Like, I felt this thing. Is this something that's going on? Is this what I'm feeling? Like, what's that review process look like? If you had a shitty lap, you come into the pits, you're like, guys, I don't like it. What happens after that?
Yeah, typically for me, I go straight to the data because the data doesn't really lie. I'm like, hey, this doesn't feel right. This part of the track, I'll hit up Ray, which is our guy who's on the computer all day, crew chief, and looking at all the data. And I'm like,
I feel like that's the perfect name for a guy who sits on a laptop all day is Ray. I don't know why.
Yeah, so I'm just like, what's happening right here? And he's like, oh, I don't know. You're doing this little thing right here. Like, you normally do that? And I'm like, nope, I'm an idiot. Let me fix that. And I'll go drive and be like, cool. Or it's like, hey, the car is bogging right here. So we can either make a change and fix this to make it better, or you're running out of gear, or whatever the case is, whatever's happening. Or you can try to drive through it now that you know what it is, and we can make a change after that and, move forward from there. My spotter and I have such a great like communication line that like he's really, really good at being like, no, dude, you're worried about something that doesn't matter, hey, you're worried about this, but you look great there. Like you're at the top there. But there's other spots where you look like shit and you need to fix that, so I'm like, oh, all right. So I'm not even going to worry about spot 1 and I'm only going to focus on spot 2 because that's where, I'm doing something wrong or it doesn't look good. Or maybe it's the judges were like, I don't like that, whatever. So we just fix it. Mm-hmm. And really that's about it. If I'm way out of line and I'm having a bad day driving, like I'm like, guys, send me some video because I need to see if it's as bad as I think it is,
Okay.
And then that helps me. But most of the time it's just the data. Like we've got the car so good and we've learned so much that like I can look at the scribbles and lines and we can figure out what's working and what's not. And it's great too because we have always had, at least for me driving on the team, we've always had 2 drivers. So I'm like, how does he look there? Oh, he looks good. Well, let's look at the data, see what he's doing different. And you're like, oh, he's floored here and you're not. Or, you're pedaling it or you're too late on the gas or you're for some reason doing this or that, and just solving the problems there. And the cars are so close that little changes between the cars can make a big difference.
What's that been like? I don't want to use the term mentoring because I don't feel like that's correct, but like helping Adam through this because like this is like that's a huge change going from that S15 and everything else he's doing into the RTR thing, and that's completely removing everything else that goes on in his life, which I feel like doesn't get enough credit. That like people forget that like okay, take whatever performance he's having on track, get rid of that, and then remember the fact that like he's running several businesses, not just one, an entire compound which also contains businesses, and the YouTube thing, and the pressure of being the most visible driver in drifting. Like
everybody misses that for sure, but it's hard to relate to that. I think too, like. Even
100%.
Even from my standpoint, I'm busy every day doing stuff and whatnot. But it's like, you know, it's all what you bring on to yourself and how you achieve and work through it. But yeah, I think on the FD weekends, like he got pretty good at just turning it off unless it was like a massive emergency. Because he, you know, you got to think from
he's got people too,
and you got to think from his end too. Like he is so busy, he is doing all that. So the weekends that he is gone and driving and doing everything. Like he has to focus on it, otherwise it's why he's wasting his time anyway. So there is a fine line, a fine balance between that. Working with him was really good. Like realistically, like it's a learning curve. These cars are not easy to drive, and like you know, I think that everybody was like, "Oh, he doesn't look good in the car," and I was always like, "You gotta like look at it like this. Like the amount of seat time he has, like drifting, he has a lot of seat time." But competing in Formula Drift and understanding it and having to drive a car at the level that we are, like he has very, very minimal seat time, you know, and he's getting thrown into a car that is like, it is not easy to drive. Like there's really no way to put it, you know, like no one's cars that are winning events are like, hey, want to try out a drift car today? Like, it's just not like that. It's just different. And like, it's hard to like wrap people's heads around that. And like, I would like with him, it was always like, hey, you know, you're doing everything you need to do. You're putting the car where you need to do, but like you're just missing on some things, and it's a different thing every lap, and like it's just a focus thing. And when he would get focused and be on, like it was really good, and he achieves he's a really phenomenal driver. It's just and I had the same problem with jumping in these cars in the beginning. Is like the window for sleeping on the chassis, I call it, like not being on top of it.
Okay.
Like I think you could, in most cars, you can drive at 85% focus and be okay. These are like 98%. Like if you're not at the best, you're not at your best, you're not able to win in this car. Like that's just how it works, you know? And again, I think that's like that in all the cars that are top 10, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you have to be on that ragged edge. I mean, that's why you are where you are, is like you're taming something, you know, you're taming this ridiculous vehicle that's not wanting to do the things that you're trying to make it do. For sure. Right?
And at the same time, it's like, okay, like what direction do you go? Like we want to keep you happy in the car. We want to do it. And, you know, his feedback was really good. And he'd give us a lot of information and we'd change the car up and make those changes. But sometimes it would just take too long to get to the spot, you know, and then it would be like, oh, we pulled Forsberg in 32. And you're like, dude, like I would be like, shit, we have Forsberg in 32. We got to drive it like the finals, you know? And you're like, and I've been driving the car for 6 years. Like I couldn't imagine being like, people forget round 2 or 3 of FD, learning to drive this car, like gotta beat a champion like in 32. Yeah. And then next round, gotta beat a champion. And you're like, damn, like he almost all of the rounds he had were like prior champions. Like that sucks. That's like, I don't want to say it's unfair because that's life, you know, but like everyone's like, oh, you didn't make it out of top 32. I'm like, dude, yeah, like, and like,
look at the pairing.
I could also be getting screwed like that in the same scenario. Like, you know, I got knocked out in top 32 twice last year because I pulled Osbo in 32, and I'm like, I got to turn up already, you know? Make one little mistake, I'm out, you know? So same thing.
And that's driving against Osbo, though. Like that's any of those, the top 5, top 10 guys, like there is no mistake.
For sure. And like, again, like I still, like by round 3 in the car, he was better than he ever was at his S15, I think. Like, obviously he had some better runs and some better luck getting pushed through and doing well, like, and competing and doing that. But I saw his driving and his ability in the Mustang already by round 3. I felt was like it was better than his S15, and I'm like, that's good. Like we're already there. right? We just need some things to fall into place the way they need to. We need to make sure that you're super happy with the car a little bit earlier in each event. And that's really just what it is. It's like when I show up, I know what I'm driving, I know where I'm going, I know what I'm doing, right? But like if I jumped in Forsberg's car, or whoever's car, Matt Field's car, I would be like, and I would probably struggle for 3 or 4 rounds trying to figure it out because little things would happen at the wrong time and I'd lose because of it, So I don't know.
That's a fair way of putting it. And I don't think people realize that, like, if you get 6-7 laps in practice, like before qualifying, you're lucky. Like you're. Like,
8's a good number. Like if you get 8, you're like, we did good practice,
Yeah. Was it St. Louis where like there was the crazy scramble that like to get to the starting just to get practice
the
in?
start. That thing is that's nuts. Yeah. I love it. I'm like, this is dangerous, but it's funny to me because I'm like, I'm not giving up. Like, you want to cut in front of me? Like, you want to battle for this? I'll just run you over. Like,
yeah, no, it was like, it was like a traffic jam. It was wild. I remember seeing it because like I was walking to like the media thing, and all of a sudden I just hear every engine. I look back and it's just how nobody crashed into somebody else is just like, and then there was like people jockeying and trying to like push to get over and like. Yeah, it was wild. And then they changed the rules where it's like, okay, it's based on your order from the last round. I'm like,
for sure.
Which makes sense. That's less fun.
You know what? Like, I'm all for the fun, but a couple times when you're like leaving from the pit area, and like, let's say the pit is technically the hot pit, like Jersey or one of those tracks, you're like fighting for that. Well, there's like people walking around and like all the fans. And I'm like, dude, like I got screwed because I was like, I'm not running somebody over to get this spot. So like all you guys that got a clear path where there were no fans, you got up there now. And I got stuck and some other people were behind me. And like, there was a couple intersections where there were FD guys coming out, like drivers while we were going. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so hectic. I was laughing. It was fun. But I'm like, Kevin, this is a little sketchy.
It's getting a little out of hand. I mean, when there's nobody around, it's fine. We'll play bumper cars. But like as soon as fans are involved, it's a whole other thing. Yeah. I mean, I'd almost want to take like however you want to sort it. Like let's say previous round, your first set of practices, whoever's at the bottom of the rankings from the previous round, you get to go first. You need the laps, you need the most laps, therefore you get that and you're guaranteed to get, it'll probably one more than everybody else if the car holds up. So, I mean, I think that'd be one easy way to kind of allow these guys who need more practice to get that possible extra lap.
Yeah, and like FD's been doing a good job too of adding time for us too. Like the laps have been getting better and creating more time for us.
They're moving through the flow. Like with the burnout box timer, like they're very conscious of like, okay, we know this is a problem, so we're going to try and
for sure
and fix this.
It's always just a thing where like we're all learning, we're all figuring this out, and the sport is changing all the time so rapidly, and like the requirements of the car, the requirements of like everything is always just moving target. So I mean, the progression of it's always the most important part, and they've been really helpful, at least of getting us some more track time when it's applicable. Some of these places we're running in between other stuff, and we're pro spec
Atlanta,
and all this other stuff, and it's kind of one of those things where you get as many laps as you can, but everybody has the same amount of time. It's
Do you think the sport's progressing in the right direction? Like, do you think this is where we need to be going, or is there like something we need to pull back on and be like, whoa, let's think about this again?
Yeah, I hate being the guy that's always like, oh, I feel like this would be good, like. Because most people are, and I think I am the guy lately because I have time and I go to the track and I don't have to be wrenching on the car all the time, and I do have a different kind of perspective on some stuff than other people, but and I'm happy to have that. But yeah, I think that I think it's all pretty good. Like all the cars are close. I think that within top 16 guys, everyone is within a couple tenths in each section. I think everyone's got cars that are easy enough to drive and they're good enough to drive it that like the battles are good and the laps are good. Like you go to qualifying and like more than half the field is in the 90s every time now. Like, I think from a progression standpoint, it's at a really good place right now. I don't know what the future is. Like, if the future the cars do get faster and they do this and we do have stickier tires and all that, like, personally, I'm like, that's cool. But like, I hate these 1,200 horsepower cars. Like, I just want an even playing field that's like, everybody is setting the cars up the way they want to drive, and like the battles are close and they're super tight and cars aren't breaking and people aren't losing because they're blowing motors up or breaking drivetrain stuff. Like, I'd hate to see it go to the next step where it was like, let's say back in like 2014, 2015, where everybody was just chasing this horsepower and the grip and the like. Some of these tires that were coming out were like just insane, like just so much grip and like not really regulated kind of back then. And now it's gotten a lot better and the regulation is good and the tire to weight rule and like some of the other things. I think the future needs to be more focused on accessibility of the car, the maintenance, the ability to fix it faster, and the ability to keep it consistent. Like, I would like to see tubular subframes in the front, that are allowed, and people, maybe they're the same as stock geometry and there's nothing changed, but it'd be fat.
Just that becomes kind of hard to regulate, but I know what you're saying.
Maybe, but you just get a stamped K-member and you have a jig, and that's, a thought. Or because then the motor swaps, the subframes, everything can be easier to attain. The headers fitment, right. Because a lot of cars now, there's some cars that are way better than other cars because of something, because of clearance, because of whatever. And like, without going so far to like change it into a tube chassis, I don't want that at all. But like, just, like you have an S chassis, finding a straight front subframe is like impossible. And like, by the time you're done cutting it all up to fit the rule book, and like, it's like flimsy and like, it's not great, and we're allowed to do all this stuff anyway, so why not have a K member that has all the same mounting points, and you have a jig that's the stock jig, it slides up, make sure it's the same, but you can build it out of chromoly or whatever tubular front subframe. Be cheaper probably too for a lot of the teams, because we're not trying to buy OEM stuff, cut it all up, spend all this time, money, and effort doing it. And then like, you crash and you bend a subframe right now, it's like you're out. There's no fixing it.
It's a good point. Yeah, they're very, very difficult to fix.
Or like the next step is like, the tire rule. Like, hey, everybody's worried about the cost of tires, the manufacturing, how many tires they have to bring, whatever the case is. Like, the tires dictate how much power you need nowadays, like, because some of the tires are so much grip and the chassis have to be changed for this and that. And like, there's so many applications that, can maybe benefit from some things and not others. So why not open it up more to make it so that it's more of an almost even playing field at that point?
So more tire companies or less?
More or less,
like a spec
or
tire?
Something that's, like, hey, we no longer have a tire that reads this durometer, right? So like in the future, by, let's say, I'm just throwing a number, by 2025, we want to have the tire at, normal operating temperature, or whatever, have this low of a durometer test, and that's it. So the tire has to be made to that. It's not a treadwear stamp that means nothing. It's not a, whatever.
It's a more subjective or a more objective test, as opposed to just like trusting that the stamp that's on it is
and maybe
correct.
It's a higher treadwear, right? So now we're limiting it now by having something that is a true, let's say 300 treadwear or 400 treadwear or whatever. So now like the tires are at a lower cost. They last longer. And like, sure, we're still going to find a way to be fast, but we kind of like,
100%.
Limit that next step that makes the cars really jerky again and make the show not as good and breaks all the drivetrain and all that. Cause I think we've all got it nailed and dialed right now, but now
it's kind of plateaued for like the last 3 years or so. I mean, on that front,
I guess they're still getting faster. Cars are still getting crazier.
Oh, I agree. But I mean, I don't feel like there's been any massive jump in anything in the last 3 years. Now, I mean, you could say like COVID kind of stalled that or whatever, but regardless, like at least from my perspective, I haven't seen anything where I'm like, holy. Now, the new rules that are coming out, I think is probably going to change a lot of that. But yeah, I don't know. I do feel like we've kind of plateaued up until this season.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of growth in terms of the quality of the cars and the power and the grip that they're putting down. But yeah, I think it's I was saying it's kind of at a really good place because like even though the cars are hooked up super fast, crazy, they're balanced and the battles look good, you know?
They do.
And like there's enough knowledge shared between everybody in the pit where like the cars are all in the box. There's none like super crazy fast. Like they're maybe a little bit faster, but like obtainable by everybody, you know? I just think like long term in things, I don't have a desire to have any more horsepower than I have now. Like to me, it's just like I would like to build a lighter car and have the power that I have go farther or whatever the case is, you know, and move things around that way. And just the serviceability of the cars become easier, you know? So I think that's kind of my long-term theory is like, let's kind of level the playing field even more moving into the future and make something that is easier to work on, easier to provide for the car, you know?
No, that's a good way of doing it. I mean, because there's so many, you can kind of get to the same place in many different ways.
Sure.
Like it could be a spec tire, or it could be more tire competition. But like you said, the durometer is that. So now we get into like maybe the way the tread is developed becomes the next thing that dictates the speed of it, or how much tread you're actually putting on there, or whatever. Or multi-layered tread, so that way you get grip for a bit and then it burns off, and then you get grip for a bit and it burns off. Kind of thing.
I don't know what the answer is. My thought process was just like, you know, more people on a similar tire or size or whatever. And like all of the motorsports that we run have some sort of, you know, tire limitation, you know, and FD has their tire limitation for sure with the weight and all that stuff. My theory was just like keeping drifting looking sick and like fun and battles being good and being as close as possible. Like if you took everybody on the field and said, hey, everybody has to go down 3 tire sizes, right? I think the driving would look and be way better than it is now, personally.
Wow. So like almost everybody back onto like a pro, basically the pro spec tire.
So like you just take the whole, I'm not saying this is the answer, just a thought. Like
no,
like,
I know. Just a thought experiment.
Yeah, take the whole tire rule with the weight and shift it all 30 mil, you know? And so that everybody's grip is now, let's say, 10% less. The maximum capability of their grip is 10% less. So your power, your drivetrain that's built to withstand that now is way more reliable. It's less load on everything. The cars break less. The cars are a little bit easier to drive. And there's some strategy now to making your tires last. There's some strategy to doing a lot of things. And I think that it would prolong the fun and box that we have going on right now a little bit better. I don't know. Just a thought.
No, it's interesting. I like that. I've never kind of thought about it in that particular way. I mean, I've thought a lot about tires and brands and compounds and all that stuff, and even think like to the sidewall, because like obviously what Nitto did with sidewalls is crazy, and like that was a huge jump in performance, but never quite to like backing it off. I actually thought about, to be honest with you, the complete opposite direction, where it gets to a point where you do a run, that's a full set of tires done. Now you're single lug, you go in, the pit stop is part of the game. You need to get your pit stop done to get to the line in a certain amount of time.
Got it.
Like I went the opposite direction.
Yeah, I mean, that's something too.
Whether that's the right thing or not, I don't know. But
yeah, my whole thing is just like,
we need that. Obviously we need.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, you're good. Go for it.
Oh, okay. It's a Canadian standoff. Like we at that point we just need the tire support, which that's been an issue.
I don't know if it's like an issue.
So like we would need companies.
But it's just like the sheer number of tires, the whole business behind and the structure behind the tires going on the car, off the car, mounting, just you know, getting rid of them after the event, like the whole thing, like.
Hey, don't worry about that. The fans will just take them. I've learned that.
Like, what are you going to do with that? They're like,
crazy.
Make a table out of it or this and that. I'm like,
hey, you know what?
Sure.
I can't say anything. I remember as a kid going to a snowcross event and walking home with like a full fairing. So I can't say shit. I have no idea where it is. I mean, that was 20-something years ago. But
smell like a burnt tire and like.
But to you
get
and I,
everything
like
dirty.
it's a wear item.
Right.
But to somebody, it's like that's a core
cool.
memory, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it is amazing to see somebody sitting in the
whole
grandstands
time
all
with a
weekend,
tire.
just
I know,
holding a
it's
tire,
wild.
like for dear
I know.
life.
It's cool though.
So,
Thank you for taking them. They got to go somewhere.
yeah, hey, no.
It lives a second life.
I'm glad
with
you got an art piece.
rather than going to the dump and recycling. But But yeah, I don't know. I don't really want to limit the sport. I just want to kind of hold it where it's at for a little bit longer, I feel like, before it starts getting crazier and crazier. But I think everybody's gotten to the point where we're all kind of, at a good spot. Teams are good. Cars are pretty reliable. There's not as many failures. The process of building a drift car has become a little bit more clear for the teams and everybody. And I'm just, I'm loving FD and everything that's going on right now. So try to keep it a little longer.
Any other like changes you'd implement given the keys tomorrow?
I would love to do some different tracks with some more turns. I think a 4 or 5 turn minimum would be my move. I think it would really help the judging. I would think it would really help the fans, because like with 3 turns or some tracks or even 2, it's such hyper focus on these little things, and the technicalities of these little things. Whereas like when you're stringing, 4, 5, 6, 7 turns together on these tracks, the winner becomes a little bit more evident, to me at least.
That's a good point.
And also, like, I feel like more style, more, ways to get through the tracks, the fluidity. Like when you're on a 2-turn track, the fluidity is really focused on like your rate to angle and then staying there and then, not making any corrections or not doing anything. And they, you make the track, even though it's 2 or 3 turns, you make it harder so that you have to reach these little points and do all that, which kind of makes it a little unnatural because you have to make it difficult. Otherwise, it's hard to decide who's better. But now when you have a 5, 6, 7 turn track, like the difficulty is just in the fact of linking it all together and making it look nice, So to me, I'd like to see some tracks with some more turns. And I think it'd be more fun to do that for the drivers. And I think it would, like I said, kind of separate wins and losses a little bit more. And I think the sport kind of needs that in one way or another in the future as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we've gotten so close now that we're like splitting hairs on everything, and it becomes a little bit more difficult for a new fan base to truly understand what's going on. And I think that's been acknowledged. I know, once again, with like a lot of the changes that are going on, that's to try and provide some more transparency with it. But I know what you're saying, that like if you make a small mistake in turn 2, it could be like minuscule, but by turn 5, like it's pretty clear where the issue is.
Yeah, or like, hey, that guy messed up 2 out of the 5 turns. This guy messed up 4 out of the 5 turns, or even the other end of the spectrum. Man, he really killed it on these 3 or 4 turns, and like the other dude, maybe didn't, whatever the case is. But that's just another thought process, just without complicating the judging aspects and the criteria of the aspects. The track being more complex would help those things.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, I think Road Atlanta is probably a good way to prove that, because like it's pretty clear in Road Atlanta, like if somebody gets behind at any point,
it's still only 3 turns,
has
though. Or 4 turns.
Yeah, it's 4, but I mean, it's more evident there than maybe in another track.
Sure.
I mean, we could play devil's advocate back and forth on this, though, for sure.
Plus, they're having some new tracks. I think would be cool, and new markets and new everything.
Yeah,
and like.
Anywhere in particular? Like get everybody on park, like all these FD cars trying to run park?
I drove an FD car at park. It was a handful,
I bet.
But no, I think too, like just the future of drifting in general. Like I think over the next 5 years, we're going to see the amount of tracks that people drift on double, whether it's new or opening a track that's already available to drifting. I think drifting is at the point where it's so accepted by almost everyone, and it's so marketable, and it's such a big fan base that if you're a track and you're running events and you don't let drifting there, you're an absolute idiot. Like people are like, I don't want to wreck the track, don't want to do ever. It doesn't matter if you wreck the track. If the track's making money and can make improvements and can do things, who cares?
Yeah. check your profit and loss sheets. You'll see the
right.
numbers.
And also like all these tracks are not just racetracks. Like it's a marketing game now. It's a huge thing. It's like, bringing in partners, doing all that. And when Formula Drift goes to an event or a big drift event goes to an event, whatever, at a track, it brings a lot of eyes to the track itself. So like for me, lately I've been looking at options and things to do like that and try to bring some more tracks into drifting and grow it, because that's just more possibilities of, just overall growth. There's 10 events every single weekend in America now. Like when I first started drifting, there were 3 events in America for a whole year, Yeah,
it's becoming so much more accessible. The knowledge is there. I think track owners are finally, and realistically, a lot of the older track owners are retiring or moving on, and it's becoming to a point where people like you and I are even 10 years older, where it's like, oh, well, drifting is our sport. It's not circle track. It's not whatever. Like, that's why they're being installed. I mean, my favorite example is just Lake Erie Speedway. It's a track that was known for one thing and now has become this epicenter where in the next 4 to 5 years, you may see the next, big drifter or drifters come out of there. And I mean, that's just one example. Look at New Jersey, right? Like that was an NHRA level track that now literally had the end lopped off, and it's there for drifting.
Yeah, it's wild. So. E-Town's got a good steez to it though. Like the whole thing is great. Yeah. It's been really been the mecca of drifting for like a long time. Whether you like are about it or not, going up there and driving, like you can't argue. Like Drift Out Wednesdays back in early 2000s and like all those events, they were the first area. That track was the first place to really have like drifting all the time at it. So it's kind of neat. Like I said, that track's always been my favorite place to drive. Everybody up there is a good time. It's fun to drive.
Yeah.
The new track is cool with the stadium and all the, fans being right there, part of the action and all that. So
yeah, I could see more of that. I mean, I would love to see once again more turns. Like don't get me wrong, like the figure of eight's cool, but like I would like to see something a little different. But hey, I mean, at this point, I'm just happy that we're getting 8 rounds. We're in these big markets. We're packing stands. I say we like I'm part of this, but like, FD
crazy.
is packing stands. Yeah, it's wild.
It's cool.
It's wild.
It's cool to see too, because like, you're like, oh, I do this. This is like the events I go to, and like, it's been like a thing where in the past it's like, oh yeah, we have 5,000 people that show up to these events, and it's 5,000 every time, and like this and that. And now it's like, no, it's 15,000 every time and more, or like whatever the case is, and like. We are in theory outgrowing all these places we're going to, and it's like, but like as a thing, like the only other motorsport tracks that have done that are like F1 and NASCAR. Like those places are huge. Unfortunately, those don't really fit typically for our sport. But so now we're like, we got to find that next level. And I think, like I said, the next 5 years, I think there's a lot of plans that are already happening and things are already in place moving forward that mean in the next 5 years is going to be some really big stuff. I've just been hearing lots of different things from a lot of different people that I typically in the past haven't heard that,
Yeah, no, thanks for starting the rumor mill for me. I appreciate that. That's Chelsea's retirement gig right there. Just being like an old cranky track owner.
That's what I'm doing. Build racetracks everywhere.
That's definitely that's a great way.
Want to do that. I just
seems like a lot of work.
I ran the school at a park for a really long time, and it was like I was able to utilize everything that they had there, and the owner of the place was amazing to work with, and it was a great opportunity. And I saw what it took to maintain a kart track that was really low key and like easy. All the people that were there were helpful, and like everybody that went to the track wanted to grow it, right? And no one complained about anything. It was like awesome. And I saw what it took to maintain and run that. And I was like, no way. Like
just the insurance. Like that's the one thing people don't realize. Just the insurance bill alone would scare the hell out of you.
And the fact that you're just worried about anyone trying to shut you down at any moment. And then like
people
tractors, the track cleaners, the all like they have a dump truck, articulated
Asphalt's not
loader.
cheap.
Like you're looking at all this machinery that you have, and you're like, this is insane. You need a guy that all you do is maintain those things. Like that's not even talking about the track and maintaining the people and managing everything. It's nuts.
And then the city puts a subdivision within earshot of it. And then it's like, people move in there like, why is it loud here? And it's like, you move next to a racetrack. Like,
and your investment and everything you put in, you're fighting for just to keep it at that point. So it's wild. But I do think, like I said, I think the future holds a lot for drifting in terms of events and growth and just having like all the little types of deals. So like grassroots fun driving, shootout style events, 8-round FD, 4-round pro spec. Like there's all these big, bubbles in what's happening, and everybody's working together, and there's an option for everything. I just want to drive for fun. Great. There's an event every weekend within, if you want to drive 5 hours anywhere in America, almost, you could drive an event almost every weekend. And like, I want to compete. Cool. There's, entry-level competitions.
Do you want to compete once?
Yeah,
exactly.
I like to be out in the West Coast and I'm from the East Coast. Cool. Like there's 4 rounds of a drift series out there too. Like anywhere.
Yeah.
So I think there's a spot for everybody now, and it's kind of like, everybody's looking out for everyone and growing it. And I think the positivity of drifting is at a pretty high level right now. And, I think it's good.
Man, I can't think of like a better note to wrap this up on, because like it's such a positive thing. It's been a sport that's been, we've been kind of maligned over the years. We've been made fun of. We've been attacked, and there's been separation in the community. And I do feel like out of all the years I've been around, which is not nearly as long as you have, that is kind of an old joke. Not really though. Although I think we're the same age, it's in the best place it's ever been.
But I think it keeps getting into the best place too. So that's why I'm so invested in it. I'm like, dude, I've been doing this for so long, and like almost anything I find negative about it, like was my own putting on it. So like, it's like the growth has been great. Like the acceptance, the marketing, the fact that everybody that started drifting and was pumped on drifting was also into social media and growing it through that. And like, all these motorsports are always like up, down, up, down, up, down. And like 20 years of just growth, like every year. It's just like, how do you argue with it? Like, it's like,
it's not much longer until these large companies just can't deny it, and then we get that funding that means you get to fly on a private jet to events and have a big purple and gold
I just want
jet
like Chelsea DeNofa Pro Drifter video game, like Tony Hawk Pro Skater. Like that's where I'm going.
Is that it? Is that your moment where you're like, we're good?
I've had plenty of moments in drifting, and I'm so pumped about all of them. Like I love it, but like that would be just absurd. Like that's so cool. Yeah. But I don't even think video games are really what they are anymore either. Like like people just want to drive sims and do all that, and like my car's in the sim games, and like
dude, it's in every sim game.
Even like Forza, it's in there, and like all this stuff. I'm like, dude, this is crazy.
That's got to be wild.
Cool.
That's got to be wild.
It's cool. I know, like in Walmart, and I'm like, my car is in the Hot Wheels container. Like that is insane. Like I still to this day, I'm like, I don't get it. I don't.
I asked Osbo about this. Like, do you have imposter syndrome where you're at now?
I don't know. I'm pretty
do you know what I mean by that?
I'm just myself, really. Like all the time.
But like,
I don't know.
You've got to have moments. I mean, I've had a few over the years, and I'm by no means at your level of fame within this industry. If I keep talking on this podcast, maybe I'll catch up quickly. But like, have you had those moments where you're like, this isn't it. This isn't real. Like, you're like standing in line. Some kid's like, I got a Chelsea DeNofa car, and turns around, you're there.
They probably wouldn't recognize
that kind of shit. Yeah, that's a good point.
No, but I don't know. I see that stuff, and I'm like,
is it just surreal?
It's surreal, yeah, for sure. I don't know, like the imposter syndrome. I don't know. Like I'm like, I feel like I've done so much and I live my life for it. So I think those are the kind of things that happen when you do that. Like I know that's simple-minded, like because I'm not. But like when I see the car there, I'm like, that's sick because like I'm not saying like, oh, I deserve that. It's fine. No worries. I'm just thinking like in terms of like been doing this for a really long time and I've been true to the game the best I could. I've given back the most I can. Like I care about it. I love it. And like this is what I've dedicated my life to. So when I see that stuff, I'm like, I feel like that's what happens when you do that. You know, like,
right.
Like, do you think like Elon, when he sees a Tesla driving down the roads, like, that's my company. I love that. He's probably like, that's a Tesla.
I'm sure there's moments.
For sure.
I mean, yeah, I'm sure there's moments. I mean, I've even had, like, personally, I've had a few, even like today, because like today, you know, show how the sausage is made. Today's the day all the episodes got released. And like, it was one of those.
Your labor type thing.
Yeah, but it's been 10 plus years of doing shit like this. Like I have a photo of me interviewing Chris Forsberg and I had a giant lime green spiked mohawk and he was at like some event and like I barely knew anything about drifting, but like I had an up and coming YouTube channel and I thought I was going to make it big. And I go back and I look at those moments and realize that like, if it wasn't for that, if it wasn't for the Thunderbird, if it wasn't for my Miata build, if it wasn't for all these other different things, like it would never have been to this point. And I had a day today. I had like a 30-minute break in my insane schedule. And I like sat there and I just kind of like looked and I was like, holy
You're like
shit.
sick.
Like, yeah, but I also was like, that's not me. Like, I was also just very much like, yeah, okay, like, cool. Now I got to get back in. I got to nail down Chelsea, make sure he's not late.
I was late.
You know, make sure everything's up and running. It's okay.
But I feel like I live the same life. Like we were talking about this the other day. I was talking to my wife. I was like, because somebody asked me the other day, they're like, oh, like what would 16-year-old Chelsea think about 34-year-old Chelsea? And I'm like, oh, he would be really stoked because like he stuck to what the plan was. If there was a plan.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's a plan.
But they're like,
but like, is there?
But there wasn't.
Right? And I'm like,
yeah, okay.
But I mostly look at it like this. I look at it like, I could have stuck to this and done this forever, just like I did. And drifting could have not grown. But I still would have had the same achievements, still done the same thing, right? Because like, obviously I'm a part of the growth, small part, you know, like everybody else is a huge part of it. And it's been a massive global team effort to grow drifting and the positivity and this, like how cool it is. But like, I also feel like, you know, like we were saying about the car thing, it's like, if anybody dedicates their life to something, you do that in hopes that these kinds of things just organically happen. Like I didn't go to Hot Wheels and be like, yo, I want to make a Hot Wheel. Like I'm not that type of person. You know, like, am I deserving of it? I don't know. It depends. Are you doing a bunch of drift cars? If you're doing a bunch of drift cars, you know what? I should have a Hot Wheel. I mean, I don't know. That's my thought process. I'm like, you know, cool. Like I owe like a lot of my success and my growth and all that to drifting as a whole. Like it's not like I just committed to that thing. Like if you committed to doing these podcasts and you planned this from when you were 15 years old where you're like, I love this. I'm going to do this no matter what. It doesn't matter if it grows or does whatever. Like you would be killing it in the podcast game. Like that's just how it works. No, but there's like, you would just keep doing it because you love it and you would find it and you perfect it and be the best at it that you can be, you know?
There's something, Matt Farrow once said something to me. I had him on my old podcast years and years ago, and I kind of asked him a similar thing. So I'm very fascinated by this of like people who are at, you know, a pinnacle in their career, or at least the highest level they've ever been at. Obviously, I'm hoping it continues to move. And I asked him, I'm like, what's this like? Like, how did you get here? What's that? And what he told me was the universe rewards hustle.
Yeah.
He's like, that's all it is. He's like, it's not like a luck thing. It's just like, it's like buying lottery tickets. Like, you know, every time you work harder, you buy another lottery ticket. And some people buy one lottery ticket and they cash out and they're set. And some people go their entire lives and buy a lottery ticket every day and never win a goddamn thing. And he goes, it just, sometimes it's meant to be, sometimes it's not. But like, if you don't ever buy a lottery ticket, you're never going to win.
That's a good point.
So it's just really, that's stuck with me. And I mean, that's like literally since he told me that's kind of been in my head where I'm like, okay, I just got to, you know, push a little bit more. And I'm sure you had the same thing. Engine blows and you're like, just got to put another one in. I just got to build another car. I got to find another sponsor. I got to do something. I got to go, you know, corner Vaughn in a trailer and like just shoot my shot, right?
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
worst he's gonna tell me is no.
Oh yeah, and well, you're like, oh, he says no. Like, what does that matter in the long game of things? You're like, it's like,
yeah,
oh, cool. Like, I have lots of things in my life have said no. Like, that's what makes me try harder for the next time thing. But I think that was the thing. Like with the Vaughn is a great example. Is like, I had reached what I was capable of doing, like on my own, and I had tried many different ways at doing it, and I had elevated and done different things and scenarios and everything I could do. And I was like, I looked around and I was like, if I could have the best odds of winning or best odds of having a good car and enjoying drifting and like having a good time while growing what I'm doing, like who do I drive for? What do I do? Or am I most happy driving for myself? And at that point it was like, I love drifting. I hate working on cars. Like, so driving for another team is the best opportunity. And I'm like, their team is the best team. Like, to me, like they look like they're having fun at the track, because there's teams out there that do really, really well that doesn't look like they're having fun. And to me, I'm like, that's like not what it's about for me. Like, if RTR was not having a good time and it was so strict and it was like I was driving for a, F1 team where everybody was on top of everybody to achieve, 100% all the time, no matter what, we don't care about anything else, then I wouldn't have joined that team. I would have joined another team, So, it's like you said, it's the same thing. It's the hustle. It's the understanding of it. And it's like, once you've figured each step of the way out, how to hustle your way into the next scenario and figure out how you go.
Yeah. Or just try and get figure out that scenario, right? That's often how it is. It's just like, okay, now I'm here.
What do I do?
What the hell do I do now?
I know. Hopefully not the same thing I was doing for the last 3 years, because while I was growing and doing all that, I was not enjoying it. So,
Yeah. No, I mean, I think we both could sit down and tell enough stories. Sure. And maybe when we get you back on, we'll do more of those. But yeah, dude, I really appreciate you coming on. I'm glad we got to do this, and the timing is fantastic. So is there anything else you want to share? Anything else you want to drop, like and subscribe? I don't know.
I always like the sign off thing. I'm always like, I don't know what to do.
It's so hard.
Well, the thing is
so
like,
hard.
I feel like we've had a great time. We've talked about everything we need to talk about. Like, we're cutting it. We're going to cut it off now. That's it. I'm like, but really, realistically, like I said, we'll end on the positive note of everything. Like, I think drifting's in the best place it's ever been. And it's been in the best place it's ever been every year since the beginning of when I started drifting. And like, I think that people that are still involved with drifting that have been for 20 years, like, they would say the same thing, I hope, because I feel like it's just been a constant growth and a constant, elevation of the sport and everything about it. So for me, I think I don't like using the term pinnacle, because I think the sky is the limit, and I think we haven't reached that yet. But I think at the amount of effort and time and place we are at is at the best it could possibly be, and opportunity wise. So just keep that going, and everybody hopefully loves drifting and continues doing it forever, because I'm not ready to sign off yet, for sure.
Nice. Well, I could not have said it better myself, dude. Thank you again for doing this. I'm excited to see what happens with you in Long Beach, and just see how this year goes for you. So
I'm ready to drive, ready to have fun. I'm ready to go through some bumpers, some tires, some everything, and get back into the groove of the best drifting in the world.
So excited. Well, thank you again, everybody, for listening. I appreciate it. If you guys liked anything from this, give it a share, get the word out there. I know these are long, but hey, this is how you get the good info. Good info happens like after the 2-hour mark. So
that's because we finally get to know each other.
Yeah, dude, it takes a little bit. I mean, we kind of known each other, but just like in passing, like, this is the first real hangout. Sweet. So, all right. Thanks again, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Oh, no! Whoa! Whoa! Go!